Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the cafe. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. We are on day number 3 of the Delphi murder trial recap, guys, and thank you guys so much for tuning in to do this with us. I appreciate you all so very much. Um, it's been a great couple days with this. I think we've been getting really good information, and it's really breaking it down in a good way. So I really appreciate you guys doing this with me. Um, I don't know if I'll be joined by anybody tonight, but if nothing else, you got my pretty face. So, hey, thank you once again, guys. Please hit that like button, share this out. Let's see who we can get in here to join us tonight with this and come apart or break this down and tear it apart and see what we got. Again, much appreciated from all of you, and thank you so very much for being here. Please, again, hit that like button, share it out, and let's do this thing. Here we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the cafe, and welcome back to the day number 3 to the recap for the Delphi murder trial. Thank you all again so much for being here. Come on in, get comfortable, grab a seat. Let's do this, guys. Let me see here. Come on in. I threw up a poll in the chat, guys. I'll give you guys a little bit of time to mess with it from the beginning. Is will Richard Allen be found guilty in the Delphi murder case? Yes or no? Pretty simple. I'm just curious to see what everybody thinks on it. Thus far, it says 54% no. So who knows, guys? Who knows? Thank you guys for doing it. Let's see. Who do we have gracing us with their amazing presence tonight? It looks like Miss Sherry N is back in the house. Welcome back, Sherry. It's great to see you in here again. Leslie and Billy's in the house. Welcome back, both of you. Wonderful to have you. Wisdom Speaks, Miss Sherry. Welcome back to you as well. Kel, welcome back to you, dear. Good to see you. Miss Zelda, welcome back. And Miss Zelda, I received a gift from you, I believe, earlier today. Thank you so very much for that. That was amazing. You're wonderful. That means so much to me. That was a beautiful thing. And God bless. I appreciate that. I got, I'll show you guys. Give me a second to get through all this, but it's so awesome. I'm enjoying some of it right now. Oh, yum. Captain Jenks, welcome back, brother. Good to see you tonight. Thank you again, sir, for joining us. Always a pleasure to see you. Mikey. Good to see you tonight, brother. Good to have you back in the house. Tomboy Charm. Well, welcome back, dear. Wonderful to have you here tonight with us. Can always use your expertise on this. Krakow. Hello and welcome back. Great to have you here tonight. Steven's Adventures back in the house again. Great to have you, sir. Fark you. Welcome back to you. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful to have you back. And of course, our own little doodle bug up in here. As always, thank you for joining us tonight, Doodle. Much love and great to see you. I've been drinking out of this cup for 3 years, Mike, and you just now noticed it? Miss Alicia J. Welcome back, Alicia. Good to see you. I'm sorry, guys. Um, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Thank you, Miss Zelda. That was so amazing of you. Miss Zelda, you guys know there's an Amazon wish list mod helped me to put together a couple years back, or maybe a year ago. So for certain things that go for this, and of course for coffee and stuff like that. So, Miss Zelda purchased and sent me a variety pack of coffee that's got all these different flavors in it. And it's like Christmas for me to see that. It was so amazing. So God bless and thank you so much, Miss Delta. Like I said, I'm enjoying some right now, and I'm gonna be good on that for a little while on coffee. So I'm grateful for that. There's like a whole bunch of different flavors and stuff. I'll show you guys daily what I'm drinking too. It's really wild flavors. Very good, and it was just so wonderful. It's nice to receive gifts, guys. It really is, especially something like coffee. I am extremely, extremely grateful, Ms. Zelda. God bless. Really appreciate that. Mikey, Mike, Mikey, Mike. Tomorrow's election day, guys. Oh boy, oh boy. For those of you that didn't get out there and do the early stuff, it's tomorrow's the day. Aren't y'all excited? Aren't y'all excited? See who our next president is going to be? Let's see here. I'll probably go early in the morning. Very early. Let's see. Making sure I didn't miss anybody. And you know what, Zelda? It's funny that you did that. When you did, I had 2 K cups left. Two K cups left, and you saved me from having to get more. That was amazing. I think we all do, Mike. Look, SRB said it too. I'm very anxious too. I'm very nervous about it. God only knows what's coming next. You know what I mean? The things have been so crazy for the past few years that God only knows. So she's doing it. SRBBBBBB. Oh, it's wonderful, Zelda. I am so grateful, so thankful. It's just amazing. Thank you so much. My mom and I were just having the same conversation a minute ago. Before, oh, really? That's wild. Thank you, FarQ. We need it. We really do need it, FarQ. In a bad way. Anybody that doesn't live in the United States that is praying for us, thank you so much. And of course, all of us are praying for ourselves because it's just anymore. It's a scary thing, guys, because we don't know what's coming. That's the scary part. Thank you, Miss Delta. Please check out Doodlebug's channel, guys, if you have not. You'll be disappointed if you haven't. Please go over there, click this link, go over there, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and share it out, guys. Please, please. Come on in, guys. 21 peeps in here, 14 likes. You guys are amazing. Keep it up. Keep it up. Where's Phil at? I'm surprised Phil isn't in here yet. Thank you all for joining us and being here with us tonight. I appreciate it. Mikey, what are you talking about? The signs, bro? Cancer, Cappy. That's out. I'm a Sagittarius. What is today? The 4th. Like 20 days, guys. 19 days or something like that. 50 years old. Woof. Come on in, everybody. Please, please, if you will, and get comfortable. Oh, that sucks. I forgot that, SRB. I forgot. That really sucks. That had to suck as a child, too, especially. Yuck. Cap, sad suit. What day is your birthday on, Cap? '50s nifty. No, I know. I look 70. I look 70, not 50. I'm gonna. That's why I liked you, Miss Cal. My wife is a Aquarius too. This is the dawning of the age of December 19th. Okay, I'm November 23rd, but Sag's in the house. Gotta love it. Again, another awesome channel. Please go check out our own Miss Sherry's channel, please. Wisdom Speaks. Another amazing channel, guys, that is definitely advocating for the missing. Please go subscribe if you haven't to Miss Sherry. Like it and share it out, folks. Please, I would greatly appreciate it. So would she. Miss Sherry's her son's is the 25th, right? There's somebody else that was in here whose birthday was on the same day as mine. I can't remember it. So should I send you a wheelchair or a walker for your birthday? It's your choice. I'm not going to tell you what I was thinking, but maybe some antifreeze to drink. I don't know. Thank you, Miss Zelda, for that. And of course, guys, please check out our lovely Mama Bear's channel. Please, if you would. Again, if you have not, go check it out, subscribe, share it out, and like it if you would. Love it, please. We would all appreciate that so very much. Is Brandy in here? There she is. Good. All right. So you're safe and sound. That's good to know. I was worried about you, Brandy, with these storms floating around right over top your head. Glad to hear. Glad to hear. Miss Ella was born in the blizzard of 78. Tomboy said the wife is the 12th, daughter's 14th, sister's 19th. The bonus sign is the 31st. Wow. You got a busy month coming, kid. Busy month. Lord. One of them babies. Yes. We all know how that happened, huh? And of course, you can't forget our lone little creative Miss Molly. Her channel's a little different than the rest of ours, but go check it out because she's super talented. Please, if you will, subscribe to that one, share it, and like it if you would. I would appreciate it. So would Molly. Well, I hope they're okay, Stephen. I really do. Cap said, I was delivered in a blizzard. He's making a rap song. Y'all don't know me. I was delivered in a blizzard. Break it down, Cap. I know I'm a dork, folks. It's okay. He. You can pick which one you want. Again, like I said, Doodle. Or what my request would be a good old gallon of antifreeze to drink for the night. Let me see here. So. Let me see. Where is she at? There we go. Ammonian. Almost almost in a pickup truck. Well, that's good, bro. That is good. Thank you, Doodle. Very much, dear. Guys, again, thank you to anybody that does donate to support our channel in that form. I promise you, it is so very much appreciated. So very helpful. It pays for the internet, the StreamYard, and all the little things here that keeps us coming out every day. So thank you for that. Of course, as I always say, we never ever expect it from anyone, and you never have to do it, but it is so appreciated because it helps to keep us going. So thank you again, Doodle. Oh, 21 peeps, 16 likes. That's probably going to be the bout of it. And I appreciate each and every single solitary one of you for being here, guys. You could be doing so many other things tonight, but no, you chose to come and hang with me. Kel said, oh my gosh, wow, mine are the 22nd, 23rd, and 26th. Wow. There's Miss Cassie. Hello, Ermagerd. Good to see you tonight, Cass. Sassy Cassie in the house. Alicia's is the 24th. Whose birthday is on the 23rd, Kel? Sassafras. Sassy. Cassie's not sassy. Not even a little. Oh my God. This is so good, Zelda. Butterscotch swirl, and it's made by Friendlies. This one is. Tastes so good. Your niece. Your boys are the other day. It's awesome, Kel. November's a busy month for you. I'm trying to read back through it, Alicia. I can't catch it all. Sorry, my ADHD is bad. I see it now. I think I irritate Alicia, you guys. I've come to that conclusion. I don't mean to, but I think I do. I do. And she's still here every day. And I love her for it. But I think I irritate her. I truly do. I know. I finally caught it and went backwards and read it all, Alicia. I'm sorry. Mikey Mike. How is Florida tonight, brother? See? I think that right there. You didn't hear it. Did you hear the other part of what I said? I said, but you're still here. And I love you for it. And here's another thing, too. For those of you that I send the notifications to, I realized tonight that somebody in here is getting it 3 ways. And I'm sorry. Let me know that you do get notifications for sure. And I won't send them to you. I don't mean to do that to like double you guys up or to irritate you if I'm doing that. I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to let everybody know that isn't getting them. That we're doing what we're doing. So just give me the heads up, and I promise you I won't send you a secondary notification if you're already getting it. Okay, so then I won't send it to you, Cassie. See? She's like, good. Tired of you doing that. Alicia gets them on YouTube main chat and from the... Okay, then I won't send them to you either. Like I said, I don't know for sure who's getting them, if they're always getting them, so that's why I'm just trying to make sure, because I've had a few people come in and say that they had no idea that we were live, so I'm supposed to be in the Bahamas for a wedding, but I won't get a passport. You gotta have a passport to go to the Bahamas? I didn't know that. That's wild. Huh. Okay, Kel, then I won't send them to you. What did you say, Cassie? I'm very sassy, by the way. I'm also a certified smartass. You got a degree in that one, huh? That's awesome. Except for yesterday, you've been getting them. How's everything working, SRB? Are you still having to go in and reset what you've been having to do? Only in Discord. Oh, that's what I mean. I've been sending them in Discord to people just in case they're not getting them through YouTube. So that's why. So if you're getting them on YouTube, I'll stop sending them to you in Discord. I just want to make sure that nobody misses it because I had a couple people were upset with me for that. So in YouTube SRB or in Discord, PhD and smartassery. That I believe, Cassie, I do. Yours are sporadic, Sherry. See, okay. I don't know. Hopefully they'll have their stuff put together soon. Okay. I will. I guess I'll continue to send them to you, Kel. I get them maybe 30% of the time on YouTube. I don't understand why it's so spread out. Like it's either you get them or you shouldn't. You know what I mean? It's weird. I'm gonna start watching some videos on YouTube to figure out this whole algorithm thing. See if there's something I'm doing wrong. If it's me that's the reason why they're not going out or what the deal is. But I'll figure it out. Oh, right. That's what most people I thought did wisdom, but it doesn't seem to work sometimes. Walt says, "Hi, Dago. Walt Harris here. I'm at the Pitt Radford basketball game, sitting away from everyone because I'm sick. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get back to my car, but maybe same way you got there. Well, I'm confused, but okay. I don't think YouTube likes me either, Cap. You still have to install and then reinstall every time. And if I exit out of the live for any reason, good God, that's ridiculous." My brother's wife's daughter is getting married into a wealthy family, and they own a private resort over there, which is outside of like Carnival Cruise areas. So, okay. I got you, bud. I didn't know that. It's interesting, though. Doodle. Did you get sick when you got to the game, Walt? Is that when it happened? Are you stranded because you're sick? I'm sure it is, dear. I'm so sorry that you got to go through that every time. I really am. Every time I click on chat to make it move, I have to turn on all messages and still instead of just. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get why this is happening. Told him if a hottie wants to. I'm sure you did, Mike. You better get pictures first. You better make sure that the pictures are what the right thing too. Jesus, that's not right. Mom said that she's been getting on him about it. Hopefully, something will come out of it. I don't know. Let me check something, you guys, real quick here. Sorry. Give me a second here. Mom told me to do this if need to be, and I need to if I can. Well, you know what? It's not there. My memory is so bad anymore. Let me see here. So. That's not the one. Where is it? Hmm. Excuse me. Where are they? Well, shoot, I cannot find it now, so I can't do it. Darn it. Good golly, Molly. Good to see ya. Thank you for being here. One second, folks. Thank you, Miss Zelda. And let's see the results on the poll. Where the hell is it? Will Richard Allen be found guilty of the Delphi murders? 50% said yes. 45 said no. Wow. Wow. Interesting. Interesting. Whatever you want to grab a hold of, Doodle. It's up to you. You can grab your ankles, your ears, your hair, the wall, steering wheel, depending on what you're doing. Whatever you want to grab a hold of. Thank you, Kel, for that. Please check out the merch, guys, if you're interested. There's some really cool stuff in there. We're going to be putting some more in there. I have some more ideas, so I don't know enough to vote. True is not a good reason, Mom said. Mom's right. Thank you again, Zelda, for that. If you guys are interested in jumping in the sauce with us, becoming a member, and you have an iPhone and you struggle, that's the link to use. You don't know hardly anything about it. Oh, you mean to vote on this? I thought you meant to vote on the election. I'm sorry. Derp. Derp, 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 derp. A lot of people don't, Cassie. Thank you, Miss Zelda, for that as well. By the way, I think, yeah, butterscotch swirl is the flavor of the coffee that Miss Zelda sent in that box of the different flavors. That's one of the ones I'm trying. It is so good. Oh, hell no. Laugh my ass off. I know who I'd vote for to be president. I would vote for you, Cassie, to be president if I could. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I seen vote, the word vote being that the election's tomorrow. I just assumed. So everybody's. Hey, Davey. Welcome, guys. Davey's here. Maybe JD Vance will figure out the camera feature on his phone. That was good, Walt. All right, guys. So I think we got everybody in here. And I'm going to stop talking now. You can get to moving. Excuse me. Ruby Slippers in the house. Welcome. Root canal tomorrow. No voting. Ouch. I hope that goes well for you. Definitely. All right. I think we're on day 8 and 9 at this point. Let's see here. I don't think we've done this yet. If we did, somebody yell at me and say, "Hey, we did this last night, dude. Move up to the next one." But I don't think we did. I think we only got to 7 last night. I think it was late. I was getting tired, so please excuse me.
Tonight on the Delphi Debrief, 2 years after Richard Allen was charged with the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German, the jury in the Delphi murders trial hears from the forensic expert who tried to find DNA evidence at the crime scene. Plus, on Saturday, we heard more testimony from the state police officer who told the jury that Allen said it's over before his arrest. Thanks for inviting us in. This is your Delphi Debrief here on WTHR Plus. This was day 9 of the Delphi murders trial. In a moment, we'll hear from our legal expert, Katie Jackson-Lindsay. But first, our senior investigative reporter, Bob Siegel, and reporter Emily Longnecker are in Delphi right now.
I do have to say something. This woman's last name is Longnecker. And I've heard it, I don't know how many times. I think Doodle pointed it out before, but that's a hell of a last name to have to carry around, guys. I would imagine. I've never heard anything like that either.
Richard Allen, as you know, is charged in the murders of Abby and Libby 2 years ago. But today we heard there's no DNA evidence connecting Allen to this crime, right?
Yeah, Scott, we got some very technical and very scientific testimony today. One talking about DNA evidence, another talking about blood patterns. It made for a really hard day for both the families and for the jurors in court.
Yeah, and I would say everybody in court that had to see those crime scene photos again, very technical testimony from that blood spatter expert.
Mikey.
Became emotional because he was literally describing the last moments of Abby and Libby's lives.
Absolutely. Let's get you up to speed right now on the 2 witnesses.
Welcome, Miss JC. Great to see you tonight, dear.
The first, Stacy Bozanovsky. She is the state's 27th witness to take the stand, and she is a DNA analyst who works for the Indiana State Police Crime Lab in Indianapolis. She tested dozens and dozens of pieces of evidence from the crime scene to see if the state could detect if the killer left behind any DNA. And the second,
I appreciate you so much, JC. Thank you for being here.
He is a major with the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department, and he's a longtime crime scene reconstructionist. His specialty is as a blood pattern stain analyst, and he testified about the huge amount of blood at the crime scene and how he thinks it got there. We'll begin with the DNA testimony. Bozanovsky, she is the lady on the right side of the video you're seeing. She told the jury she tested clothing from Abby and Libby found at the murder scene, skin cells from under their fingernails, blood found on their bodies and on the ground and from a nearby tree. The big conclusions from the state's DNA expert: Richard Allen's DNA was not found anywhere at the crime scene, including on the cartridge that the prosecutor claims came from one of Allen's guns. And the other big conclusion, she says Abby and Libby's DNA was not found on any of the items taken from Allen's home when investigators served a search warrant there. She also testified that specimens from the sexual assault test kits administered on Abby and Libby's bodies showed no signs or DNA to suggest that sexual assault took place. Bozanovsky said there was some male DNA found in evidence from the crime scene, but she said that's not unusual to find in the environment naturally or on clothes washed in a family's washing machine, for example. She said the only definitive male whose DNA was found at the scene belonged to someone who works in the state crime lab. Again, nothing from Richard Allen. And keep in mind, this testimony came from a witness presented by the state. Hearing what the state's expert had to say, you might think that this testimony actually came from the defense. It was not. It came from the state, and it seemed to be an attempt on the state's part to really get out in front of what the jury is going to hear the defense say, which is the fact that there was no DNA tying Richard Allen to the crime scene in any way whatsoever helps to prove that he did not commit the murders. The defense, though, they did have a chance to come up and cross-examine the witness, and they they took their time and spent over an hour doing that, and they kind of pounded away at this witness.
Yeah, they did. And, on that cross, Bozanovsky said, look, DNA technology is always advancing. It's ever changing, kind of as a reason, giving a reason for holding on to some of the hair evidence that they have, but also testifying that they sent 72 hairs to the FBI for analysis. And Jennifer Auger asking, well, could you have tested more? Could you have sent it to other labs? And Bozanovsky saying the decision was made not to test them at this time. And if we want to put up this quote here from Jennifer Auger, she said, but this is the time. Richard Allen is on trial now. And she said that very emphatically, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And Bozanovsky said, Richard Allen is on trial now.
That's a moment that really stood out where, it's like, hey, you had your chance to be able to do additional testing. Specifically, she was talking about hair follicles that were found at the crime scene. And she said, hey, this wasn't my call. We made the decision not to test it right now. And it's like, hey, you've got, this is the time. He's on trial right now. We don't have more time to test
And she said, look, it's at the discretion of the investigators. They basically tell her what to test. And she also testified that they were only looking for male DNA. And Jennifer Auger asked her, well, why? And Bozanovsky said, I had reason to believe based on the case history that this was a male perpetrator. So we only focused on men, basically. We also found out some of the items taken from Richard Allen's home that they tested for DNA, for Richard Allen's DNA, his blue Carhartt jacket that they took a swash of carpet from his car, some of his knives that they took during that search warrant, his boots, and of course that cartridge that was found at the scene between Abby and Liz. The jury coming out of this, the cross and the back and forth, they had 8 questions.
They did.
And technical ones, a lot about security too.
I wrote down some of those questions, and some of the questions from the jury just, to me, were mind-boggling. One of the questions, what types of quality controls are utilized for DNA reagents? Another question they asked, how do you handle chimeras? Chimeras, I believe it's pronounced. That's someone who would show DNA, having evidence of DNA in their body from more than one person. For example, like someone who might have a blood transfusion.
That's how they explained it.
There's at least one juror sending questions to the judge to ask the witness who really knows a lot about DNA. And that really surprised me, Scott. So the jury again today taking lots of notes, paying very close attention to the testimony, even though it was really dense and really technical testimony that we got this morning.
All right, Bob and Emily, thanks so much. We'll get back to you shortly. We want to bring in our legal analyst, Katie Jackson-Lindsay. All right, so what do you make of the fact that they do this DNA testing on the crime scene and don't find any DNA of Richard Allen at the crime scene?
Well, I think it's remarkable and it's significant for sure, because that's a win for the defense, right? But it might not necessarily be a loss for the state because they didn't find unknown male DNA of some other mystery person either. So undoubtedly, we will see them argue in closing arguments, hey, Richard Allen's DNA is not there, but there's also no other person's DNA there that's not accounted for. And so therefore, the killer arguably just was able to pull this off without leaving any DNA behind.
Okay, speaking of DNA, I think the other thing that we learned today from this testimony from this expert testified that Richard Allen's blue jacket, his black boots, his knives were all tested, and the girl's DNA was not on any of those items.
And that I think is more remarkable, right? Because like I said, they could argue that whoever committed this crime didn't leave their DNA behind. But now what we know is that this was a really bloody crime scene. Those girls' DNA would have been all over the perpetrator of this crime through blood DNA, right? And so the idea that their blood was not found in his vehicle, their blood was not found anywhere in his home, not on any of the knives, not on the jacket, not on the boots that they are accusing him of wearing when he perpetrated this crime. That is a bigger issue, I think, of not finding their DNA than not finding his, because they didn't find any other person's either. But even on that point, I suspect that the state will argue that based on the amount of time that has passed, he could have washed that clothing, he could have had his car cleaned, and it was 5 years. And those type of bodily fluids will deteriorate somewhat over that passage of time, as will the integrity or the composition of any DNA that might have been there.
Do you think the jury members hearing that there's no DNA of Richard Allen at the crime scene think, well, how could he be guilty?
Potentially. I think they most certainly are probably thinking that right now in this moment, because there's not been any argument about it. And that's one of the challenges of putting on a criminal case for either side. When you are presenting your witnesses, all that you can do is present the facts. You can't make any arguments about the facts in that moment. And so it's really going to fall on the state.
Welcome, Critical. Critical said after Richard Allen is acquitted, the investigation will back to the system where, oh, okay. So I get your point of view on this, Critical. I respect that. Truly. I've had a lot of people come at me with that too, actually. A lot of people believe that that could possibly be a scenario. So very interesting. Welcome, Stormy. Stormy says hello. JC said, if Richard Allen is found not guilty, where does he go from here? And more so, where does the case go and the family go? That's a good question. Truly, Richard Allen's going to have to move. First off, he's going to have to move away. I mean, truly, where could he go where he's not known? But he's going to have to move out of Indiana for sure, in my opinion. I don't know, JC. That's a hard question to answer, truly, because first off, if that happens, the families aren't getting justice. That's horrible. The girls aren't getting justice. That's horrible. I would hope that they would continue on with an investigation looking into it, but I don't think they're going to, truly. I don't think they will. Just saying. You're probably right, Walt. Although I've been talking about moving to Alabama, my wife and I have for a couple years now, so that might happen. That might happen. Wonderful to have you here tonight, Stormy. Thanks for joining us, hon. Hope you're having a great night.
To really tie this up for the jury and explain why they shouldn't just assume that he wasn't there because his DNA wasn't there, and vice versa. It's going to be on the defense to explain to them why this is a really big deal.
All right, we're going to get more from Katie coming up in a minute, but let's go back
That's
to
a good point Alicia's making.
Delphi and find out more about that second witness that was on the witness stand today.
Before we mention that, Scott, there was an interesting dialogue from the judge that came right before the lunch break today. This was at the end of the discussion regarding the DNA, or at least wrapping up the morning session. And it came after, again, several hours of talking about some really technical DNA issues. And before we broke for lunch, Judge Gall looked out into the gallery and she said, I realize that it's kind of hot in here and this has been going on for a while. But she said, I've noticed some of you out in the gallery sleeping. And then she said, let me pull up her exact quote. She said, I do not conduct.
Judge Gall stood up and said, it's getting hot in here, so take off all your clothes. No, I'm just kidding, guys. It just came to mind. I couldn't help myself. I'm curious to hear this, though.
Court in your bedrooms. I would appreciate you not sleeping in my courtroom. And I guarantee you that was the last time today that anyone closed their eyes for more than a second or two in the courtroom.
Right, absolutely.
So
this woman ain't playing. She's harsh, I'm telling you. That's awesome, Sherry. Makes for good conversation, too. No, there's a joke. She is a mess. Somebody sent me an email or left a comment that said that she's doing what she's supposed to be doing to leave her alone and stop making negative comments about her. Okay, sure thing.
Yeah, let's move on now to the blood spatter testimony today. Yeah. Some really tough testimony given in court, and I guess I should warn our viewers that even us talking about it and recounting what we heard in court today, it's extremely graphic. So we want to warn you about some of that.
Yeah, graphic.
Trigger warning. Content may include sensitive or violent content not suitable for all viewers. Feel free to step out if needed.
Because, as Pat Cicero was talking about the last moments of Abby and Libby's lives, we're seeing the crime scene photos, some
Thank you,
very
Alicia.
close up.
For a second time
For a
now.
second time. And I think we talked about, and other people talked about, we heard this before, we saw them last week, and somehow today, at least for me, and I think you said it for you, and I heard a couple other people say it was harder today, and maybe it was because of the narrative going along with it. It was so technical, it was so graphic, and again, we saw those jurors, especially that one gentleman who always puts his head in his hands. He would not look at those photos at all.
In addition to that juror, though, today really struggling with that, and there's one juror who sits in seat 6 who has really struggled. And again today, he had his head down and his face got bright red, and he really couldn't bring himself to look at the photos.
Right.
These really tight graphic pictures of Abby and Libby and their wounds. But the juror I noticed in seat 11 and in seat 12, they at one point just both looked at one another and they just shook their head. And at portions of the testimony, when these pictures were being shown, they stared off just into the distance. I saw juror 5. She looked away multiple times. These are photographs that are they're really, really disturbing.
You can't unsee them. Basically, you
No.
cannot unsee them. So this testimony came from Major Pat Cicero out of LaPorte County. This is his 34th time testifying in a case. He told the jury he was brought into this case this past February, and he reviewed crime scene photos, autopsy photos, diagrams of the crime scene, DNA reports. He also testified that he examined Abby Williams' clothes, and he went to the crime scene this past April. His job, basically, Major Cicero's job, basically, is to put all of these things together and try and figure out exactly what happened at that crime scene. And Cicero described the crime scene area that he went to this April, as a bowl, a depression, if you will, is what he said, kind of an area that goes down where their bodies were found, almost like a bowl shape. And he talked about the trees at the crime scene. That smaller tree he described as having a blood stain on it 4 feet from the base, and then a pool of blood about 2 to 3 feet north of that tree. On that tree, he talked about the stain being an upside down L, having blood spatters to the left. He called it a transfer stain, that basically a bloody object had come into contact with that tree. And we later learned that he believes that bloody object was Libby German's hand. Then he talked about another stain on that same tree on the north side, just, he said, around the corner from the L stain. And that stain is 2 feet from the base, another transfer stain. And he described that as a more voluminous amount of blood. Voluminous is a word that Pat Cicero used several times today. Voluminous amount of blood.
He did. And Emily, I thought some of the most interesting testimony that he gave today was really talking about where he thinks Abby and Libby were positioned at the times that they were attacked by the murderer.
Yeah. Also, we want to talk about, he explained the process of examining this blood, how you put a chemical on it, and I couldn't pronounce it or spell it when he said it, but it turned the blood at the scene, especially on the tree, like a violet color, so that they could look at it better to try and explain what happened. And he called that upside down L stain interesting in detail. The margins were smooth, uniform, and even. So he took each young lady. First, he started with Libby and basically went through all of the blood on her body and what he thinks happened. He brought up the photos again of her, and that's when the jury became visibly upset, and a lot of folks became upset. He described her having, and we saw the picture, she had blood on the bottom of her right foot, and he said it was consistent with Miss German moving and basically walking in blood. Then he said that there was a huge amount of blood on her hands, and he basically said, and this was, I think, just a god-awful detail when he talked about basically, and he's seen this in other victims, that it is a normal reaction when you have a wound on your neck that you would grab your neck with both hands. And he thinks that Libby did that after one of the wounds that she received, that she put her hands on her neck. I think, though, the most difficult part of this was when he testified about the moisture that they found on Libby's face, and explaining that it hadn't rained the night before or during that day, and that the moisture was consistent with tears. And that's when you saw people break down.
With
that's
tears.
When,
and at that moment, I was able to see Libby's grandmother out of the corner of my eye, and she has really tried to be stoic throughout these proceedings, even when the photos were shown. But at that moment, she lowered her head, she put her head in her hands, and she started crying. And certainly understandably so, to hear that your granddaughter
was crying.
The last moments of her life,
she was crying.
there were tears.
We also learned that Pat Cicero believes at one point Libby was sitting down. So, and he talked about this, that there was at least the initial wound. Then she is consistently moving, steps in blood. At one point, he feels like she's seated, and that's where a majority of the blood flows out of her after she's moving a few feet. And then he believes that she passed there, and then later was dragged.
I wonder about that myself, Mike. I've been struggling with that, truly. That was very, very hard to hear, SRB. You were absolutely right. Oh, so some of this stuff is really hard to listen to, guys. Thank God we're not physically seeing it. I am truly grateful for that, because I don't think I could, honestly. Hearing it's bad enough.
Dragged to the tree, and he talked about believing that she was dragged based on the photos that he saw of the leaves that were stuck basically to her leg and her backside. When they turned her over, they saw a lot of leaves, even though the defense brought up, look, in the diagram of that crime scene, we don't see anything that indicates that investigators thought there was any kind of dragging at the scene. And so the defense brought that up, but nonetheless, Pat Cicero believes that someone dragged Libby over to the next tree. Then he moved on to Abby Williams. He talked about how the blood near Abby is very, very different. Only a small amount of pooling he described at her right arm and right shoulder. And he described no blood stains on the sleeves or her arms or her hands. And he said it was very unusual to not have blood on her hands. And we know when they found her that her hands were tucked inside the sleeves of Libby's sweatshirt, as if they have described it before, as if in a fighting position, like, kind of putting your dukes up, but nonetheless, no blood on her hands. And he described that as very unusual. He said that the blood went from the one wound in her neck over her chin and into her mouth. And he believed that she was wearing the sweatshirt that she was wearing, Libby's sweatshirt, when she was killed. And he based that on the amount of saturation in the sweatshirt. And Pat Cicero believes that Abby succumbed to her injuries right at the location that she was found. She was in a supine position, facing up. And this was another quote that was very hard to hear. There was no evidence to show that she died immediately. Yes. So we know that it was not immediate, that these young women suffered. When he was asked about why no blood on her hands, he.
For those of you that aren't familiar or didn't know, the hair that was found in her hand was found to be Kelsey's hair, her sister. They've talked about how there's different ways, but it is Kelsey's hair, folks. Just saying.
He talked about the different possibilities, that one, she could have been bound, but there's no evidence of that, right. He said. Two, that she could have been unconscious. And three, that she was restrained. But in his opinion, quote, she was wearing the sweatshirt at the time she was killed. He also testified it's possible at least one person could have committed this crime.
That's what I was told, was that it was Kelsey's hair. They said it was her sister's. So now you're saying they never said it was hers? This is where I'm confused on this then. I guess I'm going to have to look back to that again then.
But on the cross, the defense said to him, but is it possible that it could have been committed by more than one? And he said, I can't rule that out. I can't rule that out. So
so some of the big takeaways that we heard from that is this blood spatter expert said that he believed that at least one of the girls' bodies was moved
Dragged Libby's.
after she died.
Right.
He indicated that he believed, again, keep in mind, this all happened at what they refer to as ground zero.
Ground
so
zero.
about this 20-yard area in diameter. And he believes that there's one spot that has a fair amount of blood there.
Right.
That is where Libby was attacked.
Yes.
And then on the other side of that perimeter area is where she actually died.
Yes.
With
and even more blood.
With even way more blood at that particular
Yes.
site, because he said that is where it appears that she would have died from her injuries.
Right.
And then her body was dragged.
Right.
And again, he believes that Abby Williams, she died in the spot where she was
Injured,
attacked
yes.
and where she was injured.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
very interesting testimony that came from that expert.
The defense also, they were trying to argue, is it possible that Libby German could have been picked up by more than one person and not dragged? And Pat Cicero pretty much sticking to the idea that she was dragged. He said based on those leaves that were stuck to her leg, because he talked about blood, having an adhering quality, and that things stick to blood. So he talked about that. They also tried to talk about, they wanted to question him about the sticks that were left on the girls, saying, is it possible that they were not for concealment? And he basically talked about, well, it's pretty much whatever, it depends on your point of view, whether they conceal it or not. It depends on where you're looking at the crime scene, whether you think that those sticks conceal. But he could not rule out, the defense asked him about this, he could not rule out that someone had washed Abby Williams' hands or was holding her down when she was attacked. He could not rule that out when he was asked, by the defense.
And Scott, we should point out, again, one of the main reasons that this blood spatter expert was brought in, and during cross-examination, there was quite a bit of criticism on the part of the defense that this blood spatter expert was not brought in
right
until
away.
7 years,
7 years later.
And it's an indication, as the state was preparing to present its case, there have been allegations, and one of the theories presented by the defense is that the blood mark on the tree that has Libby's blood on it was very intentional, and it was placed there as a sign by the killer that this was not an accidental mark on the tree. And we heard Mr. Cicero talk about that today.
Right. He talked about that he believes, he can't rule that out, but he believes that it was put there by her hand, that this was her hand. Yeah. So
important detail, Scott, that the jury heard today, but it certainly came at an emotional price for the jury. And
yeah, the hair was found in her hand. See, this is what I'm confused about with this whole hair thing. There's different things being said, so on and so forth. That's why I was trying to get this side of it. And that was a whole thing that Critical said that the sweatshirts were never mentioned in the original bolo and stuff like that, which was strange to me. So I don't know, guys, what's going on with this. It's a little strange, truly. If my sister was missing or murdered, I would have come forward with 100%, Alicia. That's what I don't understand with this. Kelsey's definitely struck me odd in a few different ways, guys, at a couple different times. I'm not trying to be, disrespectful, but there are some things that have struck me odd a little bit with it. I'll be honest. It could just be coincidental stuff, but I don't know. Yeah. Good point, Doodle. I told you guys I've had a lot of people approach me, send me emails involving Kelsey, and I don't even know what to think, truly. I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to put forth anything that's definitely misinformation, But there's a lot of people that have come at me with that, truly. So, Alicia says, do you pull out 73 hairs? Right, Bobby. That's a good point, Bobby. I'm saying that she came forward and gave them the info that they needed, not that she did something. Oh, no. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm sorry if I sounded wrong, but no, I get it. Yeah. Agreed, Kel. Agreed. That's my understanding, Doodle, was there were 73 in total that they pulled out of her hand.
For everybody in the courtroom.
Yeah, Bob and Emily, thank you so much for recounting that for our audience tonight. I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, I was questioning that the other night too, SRB. The steps that were calculated was quite interesting to me too. I don't know how to put that together, but yeah, I'm not saying that I suspect Kelsey either. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that have questioned her, okay, and because of them those different things. So no, that's strange to me too. That's what I questioned about it. I'm not saying I don't know what the deal is with it, how or what happened, but Critical says the hair was actually wrapped around her finger. That I didn't know. I hadn't heard that yet. Oh yeah, I forgot there was that many, but that was total at the scene, wasn't it? Not all those were in her hand, I don't think. I don't know, guys. That was a new piece of information that I had just gotten when we first started this, so I didn't get to that yet. Personally, I'm just getting it from other people sending me emails and stuff on it. I don't know what to think of it either. So you mean to tell me that there were 73 hairs in her hand and they didn't test one of them? No, they did test it. From my understanding, they tested one or two of them, I heard. And that could be wrong. I could be wrong, guys. This is all information that's being passed to me, so I don't know how true it is. But I heard that they tested one or two of them. Thomas or Miss Charlotte, welcome. Good to have you here. That's what I was thinking too, Doodle. Maybe somebody planted the hair there to make it look that way. That would be labeled as a handful of hair in her hand. That's not what was being said. Right. And see, this is why this is so frustrating, because nobody has the correct information. Everyone just puts it right. Thank you. See, that's why I keep saying that. Like, we don't know that this is factual information. I definitely don't. I'm just going based on what's being sent to me, and I want to hear it from here. I want to get it from this, because that's the only place we're going to get the truth, the actual truth on things. And that was my next question, is what Mikey asked. Who tested the hair? Was it local LE? Was it FBI? What was it? I want to know that. Sherry said she saw the same thing as Critical did. Okay. Critical, where did you see that at? Please let me know. So I can go find it and we can all take a look at it, because it's something that's kind of important to this, in my opinion, because that puts doubt in so many people's minds and other thoughts. Okay, that's why Bobby's right. Bobby's right. That's why the trial should be transparent. I do agree with you, my friend. And it's 100% the furthest thing from that. Agreed. 100%. Yes. That's what causes these problems, folks. And the judge is part of the problem. She's the one that's making it not transparent. So it is what it is.
Imagine what this must have been like for the family to sit through hours of testimony when we're talking about blood and their two daughters. So thank you so much for that update. We'll get back to you. Let's bring Katie back in for a little bit more analysis based on the blood evidence and the testimony that we heard from the expert in this case, who's been looking at the crime scene. What do you make of what you've heard?
I think this is evidence that we are going to see highly scrutinized during the defense's case. In my 16 years of experience as a criminal lawyer, I've never heard from this type of expert. And I think that's in part because this is really subjective. It's very speculative, and it's drawing on a lot of assumptions in terms of what the sequence of events were simply by reviewing photos. It's remarkable to me that we learned that this expert reached these conclusions based on photos for a number of reasons. One, because those photos are taken from some other person's vantage point, right? But the other reason is because one of the things available to criminal investigators is taking a video of the crime scene. And that's something that we have not heard about in this case yet. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but typically on homicide cases, the crime scene specialist who documents the scene will go out and take video footage before they ever go out and take photographs just to capture everything just as it is. And I would think that a video, as it relates to this type of expert, would be much more informative because you would see all of the different angles. If you think about it, this expert is looking at a flat photo that was taken years before. They have no way of recreating that entire scene and getting the entire view. And so I think as it stands right now, this evidence was probably
Thank you, Critical Minds. I'm gonna pull that up and see if we can watch that here in a minute.
powerful to the state in terms of answering some of those questions about those last moments. But I suspect we'll see this really come under attack.
All right, let's talk about some of the things that we heard in the testimony. The blood.
Hey, Miss PJ, thanks for joining us tonight, dear.
The idea that this may be Libby's blood, and as Emily described, maybe it was her hand on the tree. What do you make of that? Is that something that happened during a fight between the girls and the killer? Or was this something that was done intentionally to send a message or to, say something?
Well, I think there's two reasonable interpretations of that evidence. And again, the jury gets that instruction. If there are two reasonable interpretations, you have to choose the one consistent with his innocence. But we know that they have been prohibited from developing that theory more as it relates to the potential cult evidence. I think it's perfectly logical that she could have leaned up against the tree, just even trying to balance herself after being injured and suffering from these injuries. So again, that's one of those things that we'll have to see how either party argues it. But for now, it has to be really curious to the jury.
Okay, another thing that was brought up during the testimony was this idea that Libby was.
Yeah, PJ, me too. I think she does. She really explains things and breaks things down well. She puts things in simplified terms for people to understand things, and she does it. I just like her, the way she's explaining all of this. That's why I really like this coverage here. I think it's probably the best coverage I've seen on this. So,
was dragged.
Definitely like her.
So, what do you make of the idea of why she was dragged? And again, why wouldn't we see DNA evidence on this young girl if, in fact, somebody dragged her from one position to another?
That's a really great point. And that is one of those pieces of evidence in this case that raises more questions than answers. Because we know from defense's opening that they plan to present the theory that this crime happened somewhere else and the girls' bodies were placed there.
Did she say where she got that info from, Critical Minds? Do you know?
Away from the original crime scene. And so one thing that we heard from Bob and Emily was that there was admitted testimony that there's no drag marks on that scene. If her bloody body was dragged from one place to another, it seems that you would see a path that would show that blood being dragged. You would see an indentation in the leaves to show dragging. You would see the path of the leaves dragged. And so I think that's an interesting conclusion. And again, I suspect we'll probably see some challenges to that.
All right. And then we also heard that there was no blood on Abby's hands. What do you make of that?
Well, that's really interesting. That is definitely a point that raises more questions than answers, because you have to consider, again, there's sort of these assumptions and this speculation about what happened. They're saying maybe she was in some way tied up. Maybe her hands were tied up. Maybe she was being held down. And all of that is speculation. And that's not good evidence for anyone, right? And you have to wonder why the inconsistency. We know that Libby had blood on her hands, and she had blood consistent with reacting to getting those wounds. Well, why wouldn't Abby have that as well? And of course, there's always the argument that no one can answer these questions except the person who committed this really heinous crime. But it certainly leaves a lot of unanswered questions that the jury could charge to either side.
So I know that, it's almost like we're looking at a scorecard every day. Based on what we've heard, DNA and blood today, was today a victory for the state? Was it a victory for the defense? Is there a split decision in there? What do you think?
I certainly don't think that it was a victory for the state today, because from the DNA evidence, we know that it did nothing more for them. Richard Allen's DNA is not at that crime scene. The girl's DNA is not in any way associated with the things taken from Richard Allen's home. In terms of the defense, whether or not it was a gain for them, I would say today, yes. But again, we don't know how the state's going to tie that up in arguments. As to the blood evidence, it's really sort of hard to tell, because again, it depends on how they tie it up. And I think the evidence that we heard related to potentially the bodies were moved, but they gave an explanation. The defense has planted the seed that the bodies were moved from an entirely different location. Their expert has now said that, yes, the body was moved, but from point A to B within the same crime scene.
Right.
And so I can't see where that did anything for the state, but I think we have to wait on that to determine, because we haven't heard all the evidence. And so it really highlights that instruction that the jury gets: reserve your judgment until all the evidence is in. So I don't think that it's our
Gotcha. Thank you, Critical. I appreciate the info very much.
our scorecard would probably be fair at this point, because we don't necessarily know what's coming tomorrow. But I certainly don't think there were any gains in tipping the scales for the state today in a positive way in their direction.
All right. So what you've heard in terms of analysis is all based on what we heard today. But Bob and Emily also have some information about what happened on Saturday when the trial took place. And so maybe you can fill us in on what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, since our last Delphi debrief, we've actually had 2 days of testimony.
That's a great point, Bobby. Bobby was referring back to Alicia, for those of you that didn't see it, and says, Alicia, exactly, we're having to rely on the memories of people coming out of court, since they're not allowed to record anything, and different people have different memories of what was said in court. And yes, they're writing it down, but it's still not the same as getting the actual in-person, during that time situation. It's not the best to me. I don't trust that all the time. So, and Mikey says, what's hard to tell is if it wasn't Mike. It definitely wasn't at all. The crime scene was trashed. Okay. Very properly mishandled. Okay. Improperly mishandled. Sorry. That's a big mess. That's one of the biggest problems with this case, is how that was handled. I have my issue, at least, has with that. Okay. Very true, Bobby. I couldn't believe the notebooks they showed yesterday from all of their note taking. Yeah, this guy held up like 5 or 6 of those yellow notebooks. How hard is it to mishear something and write down the wrong thing? You know what I mean? That's the problem. If we were to get it for ourselves, we would at least know that we're hearing what we're hearing, or that we misheard it ourselves. That's the problem. So, and like it's SRB again, that's why I'm having a hard time following a lot of podcasters that are there. Right. Very much so. If this wasn't publicized so much, this case would be cold. Seems like prosecution rushed to the court to have a conclusion. In some ways, Cap, yeah, I agree. Sorry, I have been saying that. I love you guys for saying that, guys. LOL. No reason to apologize. Exactly. Different perceptions of what's said. Thank you. Yeah. No, you're fine. Absolutely, Taylor. There's Miss Pebbles. Yes, I'm here by myself tonight. Mom might be busy or something, so it's okay. And that's, yeah, everybody hears things a little different. That whole thing where 7 people are sitting there and you whisper something into the person next to you's ear, you can say that the color of the sky is blue. By the time it gets to the very last person, you hear the skies, the snow on the ground that rained from the sky is brown. You know what I mean? It changes it completely. It's crazy. So sometimes that's the problem. That's why I was so irritated this wasn't televised or public broadcast. It really bothered me a lot. of all the trials that we were covering, this is one of the main ones I really wanted to hear. So thank you, Pebbles. Absolutely.
Moni and Emily, you had a front row seat on Saturday for that, and Lieutenant Jerry Holman from Indiana State Police.
Yep.
It was his second time
Welcome, Stiggy and Mike.
testifying. The first time that he testified to the jury was talking about the first time that he interviewed Richard Allen, and we know that that interview led to state police then getting a search warrant and searching his home. So on Saturday, he talked about the second time that he interviewed Richard Allen after that search warrant was issued and after they got what they consider to be some of their key evidence against him, which is that cartridge at the crime scene that the state says is linked to Richard Allen.
Right. He testified, Lieutenant Holman testified on Saturday about that October 26, 2022 interview that happened at the Lafayette State Police Post 2 weeks after this search warrant was issued. Now, we know that he testified that they had arranged for Richard Allen to come in and pick up his car. He and his wife, Kathy, were coming there, they thought, to pick up their car. And it was at that point that Lieutenant Holman said that he took Richard Allen into a room to talk to him some more. And he really talked about kind of the techniques that he had been trained in as far as discussing things with someone. And he said, first of all, you try and build a rapport with the person you're talking to. So he said he talked about his military service. Richard Allen apparently served in the military. So trying to build a rapport with Richard Allen about their mutual military service. After that, he says he pretty much presented him with the report that he had showing, he said that the cartridge matched Richard Allen's gun, and that Richard Allen insisted over and over again, I didn't have a gun on the trail that day. That cartridge didn't come from my gun. Then Holman testified that he actually lied to Richard Allen, that this is also an interview technique. He said that he had been trained in. He told Richard Allen that they had experts who had analyzed the video and who could say definitively that that was Richard Allen on that video, and that this expert could also tell that that was his voice saying down the hill. And Richard Allen kept insisting no. And at one point he said this is Richard Allen. I'm not going to tell you something I didn't do. I don't care what you do to me. I'm not going to tell you something I didn't do. And Holman testified that Richard Allen, grew more and more agitated over the 2 hours.
Welcome, Miss Barbara. Wonderful to see you tonight, dear. Thank you so much for joining us.
After insisting that he had not done anything, and he cursed at Holman, and then Holman said, so I cursed back. It amped it up. So he was speaking this language, so I spoke his language back, is basically what he said.
And it was interesting because really Jerry Holman was revealing to the jury these interviewing techniques that someone who would be interviewing a murder suspect uses in an interrogation room. And it really gave the jury a lot of insight, including the fact that investigators,
I don't know where Phil is tonight, Pebbles.
Suspects when they're doing these interrogations.
And in another interesting part, Holman talked about how he left the room and Kathy Allen came in for a little bit and talked to her husband, and then Kathy left the room and said he came back in, and he told Richard Allen, look, your wife and I, we don't think you're a bad person. And Richard Allen said to Holman testified, Richard Allen said to him, what kind of good person kills two girls? And
interesting, he also told the jury that when he left the room and had Kathy Allen go in and talk with her husband, they were observing that conversation between the two of them as well.
And at the end of it all, Richard Allen basically says to him, and I'm paraphrasing, like, you're going to do what you're going to do, like arrest me. And Holman said that he went outside then and consulted with the other folks. They thought that they had probable cause, and Richard Allen ended that interview in handcuffs.
Yeah. So again, really interesting testimony from state police, but the question is going to be, how does the jury interpret seeing state police, seeing the state investigator who interviewed Richard Allen essentially lie to him at one point in the deposition, and this was on cross-exam. In the deposition, he said, Richard, I'm not lying to you.
That would be unethical.
He said that would be unethical, and yet he was lying to him. So how that's going to land with the jury will be interesting.
And they're going to get a chance to see that in the videos. They were talking about playing them on Saturday, and in the end it was decided, okay, we'll play those sometime next week. So we're going to see that October 26th video of Jerry Holman, and then we're also going to see that first questioning of Richard Allen October 13th.
I am really curious to see that because, you know, in the courtroom, the jury, they're going to get to see exactly what Richard Allen's demeanor was as he was being interviewed. And I think just the way he presents himself, that will probably tell the jury a lot. So want to mention today, we had a new motion filed by the state. The state wants to introduce some evidence that we haven't heard anything about before.
Yeah, a Google search history. And they didn't say whose Google search history, but they had an email address attached to this Google search history, foodjacka0@gmail.com. This was after, obviously, the jury had left for the day, but they want to introduce some kind of Google search history. The defense argued against it, saying that the state basically needs to prove that it's only
Thank you, SRB.
Google search history, that not multiple people had access to whatever device this Google search history that they want to introduce is found on. And they cited some kind of case law.
That's a good point, Bobby. I agree.
We're going to review that case tonight. The judge saying that she was going to take it under advisement, but the defense ending things saying that they're prepared and Kathy Allen is willing to testify if needed about this specific motion.
Interesting that it's coming at this late point after the trial has already begun. So we'll see how the judge rolls on that motion. We do want to show you some some new images for you from inside the courtroom. We're trying so hard to be able to bring you inside the courtroom with us. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting in the courtroom next to Lee Bushka. She is a sketch artist, and she is incredibly talented. Want to allow you to take a look at some of the sketches that she drew inside the courtroom today of the defense team, of Judge Gall, of prosecutor Nick McLeland, of Richard Allen. When I tell you that some of these are essentially more pictures than sketches or photographs more than sketches, that's how accurate Lee's sketches are. So our thanks to Lee, and we'll have those sketches to be showing you. You'll see more of those here over the next couple of weeks.
Welcome, Miss Cheryl. Thank you for joining us tonight, dear.
And Chris Webb, I want to ask our photojournalist here if he would quickly zoom in behind us. Take a look right now. That is the main entrance right now to the Carroll County Courthouse behind us. I'm counting, wow, it looks like there's already about 15 chairs and people who are lined up back there just getting ready. Here we are hours and hours before the doors open to the courthouse at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, before the courtroom.
That's crazy that people are sleeping outside just so they can get into this courtroom. That's nuts to me. Good God. I don't get it. It's got to be getting cold at night. Yeah, I agree with that, Cap. They're making court TV look like, you know, a cartoon channel. It's a joke. Yeah, I'm right there with you, SRB. I agree. From my understanding, Richard Allen's wife, Kathy, was even giving up some of her family seats to some of these reporters so that they could get in there to put the case out there. You know what I mean? To get it out to people. So that's interesting. I agree with that, Sherry. I definitely do. I mean, that's pretty wild that, you know, she's willing to hand over some of her family seating to the press so that they can get the story out. You know, that's wild. God bless her. She feels that strongly about her husband's innocence, and she wants the world to see what's going on with this, you know, so that's why I believe she's doing it. What's annoying, SRB? I want actual photos. And yeah, now I get it, SRB. We should be able to see this. This is what this judge pisses me off. Why she pisses me off so bad, because she does stuff like that. That's what I'm saying, Pebbles. I feel like she truly does believe in her husband and his innocence, and really, really wants him to get the justice he deserves in her mind, as, you know, getting a fair trial and everything. So, welcome, Dub45. Good to see you tonight.
Doors open at 8:30 tomorrow morning. People are already lining up 12 hours before tomorrow's hearing. that's how much interest there is in this case. We have been really fortunate to be able to have a front row seat to bring you every day's testimony. We will be back in the courtroom tomorrow, and we certainly appreciate you joining us on these Delphi debriefs. Scott, we'll send it back to you.
Yeah, Bob and Emily, before I let you go, I do have one question about the cartridge. So the state earlier in testimony said the cartridge that was found at the crime scene belonged to a gun that Richard Allen had, that it had been ejected, not fired. Today, did the DNA expert talk about DNA, if anything was found on that cartridge at the crime scene?
She did. Stacy Bozanowski, she talked about the fact that there was no DNA that was able to be taken off of that cartridge, and
I agree with you both. I think this is the best coverage of this trial that I have found. I've looked through different things trying to find the best for you guys. I mean, Andrea Burkhart does a good job, but this is just cut and dry what it is. They're bringing everything out to you. They're explaining it with that attorney. I mean, this is the best coverage I've seen of this thus far. So that's truly my feeling and my opinion, of course.
The deputy prosecutors had helped the jury understand that. And so she explained the cartridge is so small and that it just is not really a good piece of evidence to be able to take DNA evidence off of. So she said, based on that and based on the fact that someone who is handling a cartridge would not really handle it very much, she talked about something called touch DNA. And it comes into play both with that cartridge and potentially with
that other lady is an attorney too, Tomboy. The one that they go to in studio and refer to, she's an attorney as well. So
a suspect or the murderer who would be moving the bodies, the DNA expert was asked to explain touch DNA and what that is. And, you know, she talked about the fact that if someone touches your hand, is that enough to leave DNA? And she said it could be, but it also could not be. It depends how long that touch took place, how hard the touch took place. She said it's not really the best way to be able to get DNA. She said that blood and saliva, fantastic sources to be able to get DNA, but other things like hair follicles, if they don't have the root attached to them, not good for DNA.
I agree,
Simple touch is not good. Urine, things like that, not good for DNA.
And that blood can drown out other DNA. When there's a lot of blood,
yes,
it's essentially it drowns everything else out.
Yeah. So she did explain, Scott, why I guess the jury might not read too much into the fact that there was no DNA found on that cartridge, which again the state is alleging is linked directly at one point cycled through the gun owned by Richard Allen.
Bob and Emily doing a great job up in Delphi. We'll see you tomorrow in Carroll County for more coverage here on our Delphi debrief. I want to bring our legal expert back in to talk a little bit more about the Saturday testimony. So this Indiana State Police investigator and the interrogation techniques that we heard them talk about, that he admits to lying to Richard Allen while he's interviewing him. How does that land with the jury? And is this consistent with other investigative techniques, if you will?
So my experience has been that jurors do not like that because it is deception. But our courts have concluded, our higher courts, when evaluating this sort of conduct, they've concluded that it's permissible. It's permissible as an investigative technique. The idea is if someone is truly guilty, they're not going to, or truly innocent, on the other hand, they're not going to be influenced by someone lying to them because they know what the facts are. But it's just not true. You can be influenced by that. And we have seen a body of work related to false confessions that people make. And so it's troubling. And more often than not, jurors relay that they find it to be troubling as an investigative technique.
Any other takeaways from either today's testimony or the testimony that we heard from Saturday's witness?
Sure. As to Saturday's testimony, I think once we were able to learn.
Actually, you know, I found it, but if it wasn't for SRB making a good point, you know, you got to thank her, because I would have never put this together with the playlist that I have if it wasn't for her saying, hey, I think this is really good. We should follow this, you know, basically giving me the heads up on this. So you got to thank her, Cap, not me.
About Richard Allen's follow-up statements to that original statement outside of his home when the search warrant was being served. We heard last week that he said, it's over. And so now we heard that when Holman followed up on that statement,
I agree.
Richard Allen explained,
really good. I like her a lot.
To my coworkers, you've been out in the community asking questions about me. You've ruined my life. It's over for me. And so that gives a little more context to that. And I think that's important. I think it's also important that we heard that he blanketly denied these allegations or any involvement 20 to 25 times, right? Because we're going to later hear testimony that he later confesses to these crimes. So I think it's important that the jury was able to hear that initially, when he was of sound mind, when he was in the comfort still of his home, before he was taken away to this pretrial detention facility, he did deny it. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that he gave no explanation as to why a bullet linked to him may have been out on that scene. In fact, he said, "I don't believe you. That didn't happen." And that cuts both ways, because one could argue that if he were truly guilty, he inserted himself into this investigation, remember?
Right. You remember he called the tip line a few days after the murders.
Absolutely. And so if he were simply trying to cover his tracks in that regard, he could have covered his tracks and said, "Yes, I go out there hunting all the time. It makes sense that a bullet connected to me would be out there." But he didn't do that. He said, "There's no way." And so now today, when we hear questions from jurors about the security of how the evidence is kept, their quality controls, it has you thinking if they're wondering if there's some sort of conspiracy where evidence could have been planted. So I think now that we're seeing more and more witnesses, we're able to tie some things that we heard earlier, even juror questions, to some things that we're hearing later. And that's pretty interesting in terms of gauging which side is doing what.
That's why I like her, Bobby. She's worked as a defense attorney and a prosecuting attorney. Therefore, there's no bias. She can see it on both sides, and she's very unbiased. That's why I like her so much. Not to mention the fact that she explains things so clearly and so so hard, so blatantly and very, very clearly, so that people understand certain things that maybe they would normally wouldn't. She's very good. Like I said, and like you said, she's got experience on both ends of the spectrum and knows how to look at things in both ways. That's why I like this lady so well.
What on that scorecard?
Yeah, Katie Jackson Lindsay doing a great job breaking this down. We are with you every weeknight at 10 o'clock here on WTHR Plus, doing this deep dive so you can better understand how this case is unfolding. Since we don't have any cameras in the courtroom, we want to make sure that our reporters who are listening to all the testimony are giving you all the details so you can learn all about this big case. In fact, you can find our ongoing coverage, including detailed reports on each day of this trial, by going to WTHR.com/Delphi. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Moving on to the next one.
Day 10 of the Delphi murders trial. And for the first time, the jury hears the voice of Richard Allen. He's charged with the murders of Abbey Williams and Libby German. Today, the jury saw him deny the murders again and again and again during taped interviews and interrogations with police. But they also heard the first of many alleged confessions that Richard Allen made in prison. Thanks for inviting us in. This is your Delphi debrief here on WTHR Plus. Let's get you right to Delphi, where our senior investigative reporter Bob Siegel and reporter Emily Longnecker are there. So Bob and Emily, what did you make of seeing these videos in court today?
Scott, today was
yeah, it worked out really good, SRB. I'm very grateful.
I mean, it was just jam-packed today, starting with videos and then just witness after witness, the most witnesses we've seen of any day so far. And as you mentioned, we got to hear from Richard Allen. That's really the focus of today. And Emily, we didn't hear Richard Allen in court. He didn't speak at all.
Nothing.
But we got to see him on video, speaking on video. We got to see one of the notes that he wrote. We got to hear what other people heard him say. This was really focused on helping the jury hear specifically from Richard Allen.
Absolutely. In that first video, October 13th, and in that second interview from October 26th, in that second interview, we get to see Kathy Allen come in and interact with her husband. And of course, she was in the courtroom today, watching herself on video, watching them interact. And we'll talk about that in a bit and some of the exchanges between them.
Well, let's set the scene for you. Right now, we are just across the street from the Carroll County Courthouse. It is directly behind us here. We can see it lit up. We're actually inside tonight because it's crazy windy here in Delphi at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I tried to hold my notes outside. They were flying all over the place. So we decided we're going to move inside. So
welcome, Miss Josie. Wonderful to see you here, dear. I hope you're feeling good. Great to have you in here tonight. Appreciate you so very much. Let me see here. I thought The way they presented the handwriting and the sentence structure lack therefore was brilliant. Very good points. Yes. Agreed.
We have all of our notes in front of us, and 30
Lots of them.
pages of notes today. I filled up an entire notebook in just 2 days,
Two
just with
notebooks.
all of the witnesses.
So
let's
a lot of quotes, a lot
Yeah,
of
let's
quotes
get you
today.
caught up on today's witnesses first. Here's today's testimony. We started with those 2 interrogation videos of Richard Allen back in October of 2022, just right before he was arrested by investigators. We heard from John Gallipo. He's the former warden at the Westville Correctional Facility. He testified before the jury today. And then we heard from just a whole bunch of correctional officers, 7 Westville correctional officers. We heard from Ethan Drang, Michael Clemens, Michael Roberts, James Early, John Miller, Brandon Fisher, and Raymond Smith, all of them correctional officers who got to hear statements made by Richard Allen while he was at the Westville Correctional Facility. And we also heard from one additional correctional officer, that's Jason Bedwell, and he is a correctional officer at Wabash, where Richard Allen was moved to between the time he was in Westville and between the time that he was moved here but before he was moved to local jails, which is what his defense team was wanting all along. So let's start off by talking about those videos, which took up the entire.
We truly love having you here,
They
Josie.
started
Truly,
off with
we do.
2 long videos showing Richard Allen being interrogated by state police. The jury got to see how Allen responded when he was questioned by investigators in October of 2022. This was 5 years after he voluntarily contacted police right after the murders to tell them that he was on the trails and on the Monon High Bridge on the day that the murders happened. I thought from looking at the videos that Allen was very respectful and calm in that first video. He offered information willingly. He appeared relaxed and animated while he was talking to both the Carroll County Sheriff and to one of the main investigators from the prosecutor's office, Steve Mullen. But once police told him that they wanted to search his phone and his car and his house, Allen, he remained polite, but he said at that point he needed to discuss that with his wife. And he told police, he said, "Your attitude toward me has definitely changed. This feels like you're interrogating me. You've known from the beginning I was out there. I told you that." And then Steve Mullen responded, "We're not mad at you. We're not upset with you. We're just trying to get the truth." And they asked Allen if he was the man referred to as Bridge Guy captured on Libby German's phone. They showed him the picture. And he responded, "It's not me. You're not going to convince me it's me. I had nothing to do with those murders." And he then said, "We're done. Arrest me or take me home." And there was an interesting part in that interview where he also said, "I don't want to be somebody's fall guy. Please don't think I'm questioning your integrity. From this conversation, it's like you think I did it." And it was really interesting, Emily, to see how things evolved over the course of that interview from him thinking that police just wanted him to come and meet with them and talk about what he saw that day, bringing him back in years later, because as we now know, investigators had just rediscovered the file that showed that he was out on the scene that day. They desperately wanted to find who was the man that we've heard some people say was out on the trails on the afternoon of the murder. So Richard Allen thought he was just going there to fill police in on what he knew that day. And then he started very clearly to get the idea, wait a second here. They think I might have something to do with all this.
And we know a couple hours later, here they are at his house with a search warrant.
Yes.
Searching through his home.
Yes, absolutely. So they did take Richard Allen home after he said, either arrest me or take me home. They did take him home. Then they served those warrants. They were able to search his car. They were able to collect the cell phones. They were able to recover knives and the guns. And we know that what happened next was that they tested the gun that they found inside his home. They got back results from the state police lab, and the test results show that a cartridge found at the crime scene right by Libby German's foot was cycled through a gun that Richard Allen had that they confiscated from his home. And so then they called him back in
2 weeks
later. And then the jury got to see that second interview. This time it wasn't with the local sheriff, it was with state police investigator Jerry Holman. And that was fascinating to watch.
It was, Jerry Holman comes in. And again, we talked about this yesterday. He tries to build a little rapport with Richard Allen. They talk about their mutual military service. He asks about, has he ever been to a firing range? Has anyone ever borrowed any of his guns and knives? And then he kind of tells him, hey, we've got these test results. I've got this official certificate right here that says that this cartridge matches your gun. And that is when we see, Richard Allen start to deny over and over again, saying, "What, you're not going to get me to confess to something I didn't do." And at one point, Holman says, "We're trying to help you." And he says, "No, you're trying to accuse me of murdering 2 little girls." Right. And so, and at different times during this interview, Holman leaves and he comes back. And what I found kind of interesting
God, you guys, I would give anything to watch those interrogation videos. I really, really would. Just I feel like I need to see Richard Allen's reaction to the interrogation to make my own assumption and my own, not assumption, but my own feelings towards Allen himself. I need to see that. I need to see him personally, respond at which maybe we'll see after the trial. I don't know, but I really do need to see that in some bad way. I just driving me nuts. So yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Pebbles. Absolutely.
Interesting is, here he is presenting him with this evidence saying, we think you did it. But then he would come back in and say, hey, do you need a smoke break? Do you want something to drink? As if just 5 minutes earlier, they weren't talking about this really terribly serious matter, right? So,
and he kept portraying, I'm here to help you. I want to.
It's wonderful to hear that, Josie. She says, hello, Pebbles, Alicia, J, SRB, Kel. Love being here. Thank you. You are all so positive and you help make my evening so relaxing before I fall asleep. That makes my whole day hearing that, Josie. I'm glad that this channel can be helpful and all these amazing people could be as well, because that's truly what we want to be able to do. I'm glad you're here, and I hope you're feeling good and doing better. Pray for you all the time, Josie, and hopefully it's helping. I truly hope it is. So, right, Cap, 100%. I'm hoping that after this trial is over, whatever's said and done, that stuff will be released and we'll be able to see it at that point. I'm hoping so. Because I'll go back and watch the whole thing again, just so I can see everybody's reactions on this. Exactly. We got to see Sarah's, which gave us a better. Exactly, Bobby. That's the whole point. I think it'll help us to be able to see Richard Allen's reactions to the interrogation, to seeing different photographs, different things. It's going to give us an outlook on who Richard Allen as a person is more than what we know him as. We don't know him as for nothing. We didn't get to see anything of him other than seeing him drugged through the courtroom by other officers. That's it. That's what we know of him. We don't know his voice very well at all. We don't know. We just don't know who he is, and I think we should know that truly. So that's just an opinion I have, folks, and I feel that strongly about that. So I'm hoping that after this is all over, I'll get to go back and watch this and or see any of that stuff to kind of make my own, determination.
Right. Help you. I
Right.
don't think you're a bad guy.
Right.
He would say over and over again. It was really, but it was clear, and Richard Allen was able to clearly detect this. He was trying to pull out a confession from him right there.
Right, and you got to see, and we know Jerry Holman has testified that when he would leave the room, he would still observe Richard Allen, what he was doing. And I was watching the video of Richard Allen, his body language in there. I would say he remained pretty much relaxed, he had his leg crossed. I saw him look at his fingernails a couple times. He went like this, he stretched his neck, he looked up, he sighed a couple times. He did shake his head a lot. He did a lot of this in between Holman coming in and out, but it stayed pretty calm for a while.
Calm, and I thought that in that video, I was trying to
put
myself in the jury box
Right.
to be like, okay, if I'm the jury, what am I making of this? And I was also trying to put myself.
That's awesome, Josie, and same to you, dear. Same to you. We love you in here, and you know that. And just keep getting better, please. You keep getting better.
In the seat that Richard Allen was in,
Yes.
how would I react if I was being interrogated,
Right.
and if I had committed the crime, or if I hadn't committed the crime, how would I react? And from looking at his demeanor, again, I thought under the circumstances he remained calm.
Very.
He certainly never changed his story through the entire interrogation,
Not at all.
despite being hounded over and over again. And you've got some of the quotes from that
Yeah,
interrogation.
I mean,
to talk about.
and there were some really interesting quotes. Jerry Holman, this is quote one, says, "The media is going to portray you as a monster. There's only one way to get out of this, and that's to tell the truth. What happened that day? Are you the mastermind?" And Richard Allen says, "Anyone who knows me knows I could never do anything like that. I did not murder 2 little girls. You're trying to convince me to confess to something I didn't do." And Holman, tries to kind of convince Allen that he's on his side. Let's just talk about this. Let's tell the truth. Let's get out in front of this. He says, "This is your opportunity." And Richard Allen says, "Will you please stop giving me opportunities?"
He was tired at that point.
He was
like,
I'm
"Stop
done.
trying to tell me over and over again that I did
Right.
this."
I didn't kill 2 little girls. Will you please stop giving me opportunities? I didn't kill 2 little girls. Holman, what did you do? And Richard Allen says, "I went for a walk on the trail and I went home. And later, Holman sends in Richard Allen's wife, Kathy Allen. We know that she has been, somewhere talking separately, I guess, waiting in the lobby at one point. But it's our understanding, I think, and Holman testified to this, that they were talking to her a little bit. And
I thought
I
that
agree,
was
Sherry.
actually like some of the most touching
It was.
parts and some
It
of the
was
most
compelling.
emotional parts of the video, because again, Richard Allen is in this interrogation room and he's just learned that police are saying, we have traced evidence at the crime scene to a gun that you own,
Right.
and he's being told that.
Right.
And then Jerry Holman is telling him, hey, we've told your wife that.
Right.
And so he knows that she's gotten the same information.
Right.
And then this is the point where they both come together.
They sent Kathy in there because they thought, after drilling him the way that they did, that they probably weakened him, and that he would come out to the woman that he loves and he would tell her the truth as they're listening and watching, and that's how they would get a confession out of him for this. It didn't happen. That's something that I've questioned this whole time. Through that entire interrogation, with all the pressure that they put on him, nothing changed. Nothing changes throughout his testimony the whole time to the police officer of what he was doing there. Then all of a sudden, once he goes into this prison and he's been held in segregation for all this time, this, that, and everything else, then he cracks, in my opinion, and things start being said under duress, in my opinion, and that is, in my opinion, the only reason why he said what he said. These are my opinions, completely, folks. Nobody has to agree with me by any means. I'm just saying that's what I feel. This is how this all played out. So, right. They had to lock him down, basically strip him of all of his dignity, and break him down, folks. Halidol injections, all this stuff, to get him to say something. Anybody would probably admit to some shit. I probably would admit to it, and I had nothing to do with it. I don't even live there. After all that, most people can't handle that stuff, folks. It's almost like a POW tactic in some senses. They try to break people by pushing them to their extreme limits, and then they crack because they just can't stand it anymore. That's what I was saying. The Halidol injections are the drugs that they gave him. You know what I'm saying? So, absolutely, it's insane. And I'm sorry, guys, but that's what makes me look at him as being the possibility of him being more innocent than guilty of this. That's where I leaned for that direction, or why I've leaned in that direction for as long as I have, because of all that, knowing what the interrogation was like beforehand. After, mind you, this interrogation was after 5 years of this case already being drawn out. So again, yeah, 13 months, Sherry, it's a long time. It is absolutely like the CIA stuff, truly. So, not good stuff, guys. Not good at all. And it's got to look bad on the prosecution when people are knowing this. At least the jury, I'm sure, is looking at this going, really? I probably would be. I'll say that much.
Together,
Right.
And kind of reconcile the fact that they both now know this information that's been presented to both of them by state police.
Yeah, and she comes in and he stands up from the chair and they hug, and he's kind of comforting her, and he's saying it's all right, it's going to be okay. And he says to her, they're trying to tell me that you actually believe that I did it, and I don't believe that. I don't think that you think that I did this. You know me better than this. And she's crying, and sometimes it was hard to understand her. And I was watching Kathy Allen in the courtroom watch herself on this video, and at times, she was dabbing her eyes and crying. She's looking at herself from 2 years ago in this moment of great stress. And can you imagine, right? She's hearing this from investigators. They found this cartridge of her husband's in the woods, and she asked him, "How did a bullet from your gun get out there?" And he keeps saying, "I don't know. Yeah. I don't know."
He didn't have an answer for that.
He had no answer for it. And then Jerry Holman comes back in and kind of joins them. And he, asks, he says, and Kathy Allen is sitting right there. And Jerry Holman says, "Now you're going to drag your wife and your daughter through this because you're too effing bullheaded to get out ahead of this." And this is the point where Richard Allen says, "Look, can my wife leave? Let's let let's let Kathy leave.
Yes.
And then and ask Holman, is it okay if I kiss her? Can I kiss her goodbye? Can I give her a hug goodbye? And Jerry Holman says, sure. So he hugs her, kind of comforts her, and she leaves. And Richard Allen says to Jerry Holman, you're going to pay for what you did to my wife. Did you see my effing wife? And Holman, this is when it really heats up, right? I mean, they're swearing. So then Holman responds, did you see those two effing girls you dragged down an effing hill and you effing killed them? You're effing guilty and I'm going to prove it. This is effing on you, Rick. And then the video stops. And then Judge Gall, read to the jury what we don't see then on the video.
God, I'd give anything to watch that, guys. I really would give anything to see that interrogation. I'm telling you. Thank you, Zelda, so very much, hon. I appreciate that so much. That I need to see that. I pray to God they let us see that after this trial. I really do. I really, really do. I want to see that so bad.
But that is, Jerry Holman leaves the room. He consults, we know, some other investigators, and he comes back in, and they put Richard Allen in handcuffs.
Yeah, he was in handcuffs. And it's interesting to point out that there was a conference even before testimony started today, before the jury saw those videos, where the state and the defense, they had a sidebar conference with the judge to decide what the jury was going to be able to see, what they were not going to be able to see. They did not want the jury to see Richard Allen being led away in handcuffs. So they decided that they were going to stop the video. And they told the jury, this is a redacted video and we're going to stop it at certain points. I suppose from a defense standpoint, you never want them seeing your client being led away in handcuffs. Right. So that part was just explained to the jury rather than them seeing it.
I mean, and they didn't want the jury to see this video at all. You remember in April, they filed that motion to suppress this October 26th video, but obviously that didn't happen because here we saw, most of it today. So,
right. So again, Scott, I think very important for the jury to be able to see that interaction between Richard Allen and law enforcement, whether he seemed reasonable, whether he seemed nervous, whether he seemed agitated, whether, he changed his story. And certainly he never changed his story during the entire time, over and over and over and over again. He said, I am not going to admit to something I didn't do, regardless of how much you're trying to get me to do that.
Yeah, I wonder how Richard Allen, as he's sitting there watching this interrogation video played for the entire courtroom, including the jury, how is Richard Allen responding to all that?
I mean, he was watching. I saw him a couple times consult with his attorney, whisper something to Andrew Baldwin. I was just watching it from the point of view of here's this man who looks very different than the guy in that video, right? Yeah. He's looking at himself 2 years earlier, a lot more weight on him in that video. He's got a full beard, long beard. He's dressed in all black. And today here we're looking at Richard Allen, significantly less weight on him, dressed in khakis, green colored shirt, I think it was today. So I was just thinking about what it would be like to sit there and watch myself from 2 years ago in this situation. Like you said, you're putting yourself in his spot, you're putting yourself in their spot.
Right.
You're thinking about all the angles.
And during this whole time, we should point out that we were in our spot, sitting in the gallery in the courtroom, and furiously writing notes to try to get these quotes and to really try and capture what was being shown to the jury. So, Scott, it was interesting to watch the jury. I didn't get a chance to see the jury very much because I was writing notes furiously to try and write down what was said. But Kathy Allen was also sitting right in front of me. Right. I could see Richard Allen out of the corner of my eye, and they were watching the videos very closely.
Right, yeah. They were.
Let's go ahead and pivot now to the afternoon testimony. And that was all about the confessions that, and we were talking about earlier. Do we call them confessions? Do we call them alleged confessions? We heard testimony today from lots of folks who said they heard Richard Allen confess while he was in prison. And so we're going to refer to them as confessions, and it's up to the jury to decide how much weight they're going to put on these statements and whether what the folks who testified today said was credible or not.
Yeah, and in some instances, they were testifying about hearing him talking to himself. And then other times when these corrections officers were these suicide companions sitting outside his door, and they're actually talking back and forth with Richard Allen, and they're engaging in conversation. And these suicide companions, they're called, we heard about this program, they're sitting outside documenting everything and writing it down in real time as he's saying this.
Right. All right, let's jump into that. We'll fill you in on the testimony from this afternoon. The first witness that we heard from this afternoon, former warden at the Westville Correctional Facility, John Gallipo, told the jury Richard Allen spoke to him several times while Allen was in a suicide watch cell there at the maximum security prison, one of the most secure facilities anywhere in the state of Indiana. He said one of the times that Allen spoke to him, Allen verbally confessed to the murders. He told Gallipo that he disposed of a box cutter in a dumpster that
at
CVS, which is actually, we can kind of see it just down the street here from where we're sitting.
Where he worked.
Where he worked at the time. And another time, he said that Allen wrote him a note, and that note said, "I am ready to officially confess to killing Abby and Libby." And the note also said that he was looking forward to the opportunity to apologize to the victims' families. That note was shown to the jury in court. Then jurors heard from prison guards assigned to suicide watch outside Allen's cell. They told the jury they heard Allen make several more confessions. Corrections officer Michael Clements, he told the jury what he overheard Allen saying. He logged in his notes. The offender says, "God, I'm so glad no one gave up on me after I killed Abby and Libby." And he also said, "I, Richard Matthew Allen, killed Abby and Libby by myself. No one helped me." Another corrections officer, Michael Roberts, told the jury,
Guys, these statements sound so scripted. Seriously, listen to them. God, I'm so glad no one gave up on me after I killed Abby and Libby. Nobody speaks that way. Come on. Especially with stating their names. Okay. And then I, Richard Matthew Allen, killed Abby and Libby by myself and no one helped me. Come on, folks. If you can't tell me that that sounds scripted, truly, honestly, come on. Please, somebody tell me I'm wrong. Anybody? Does anybody disagree with me on this? No, it's not at all, Pebbles. No, first of all, I'm telling you, if he would have made the first statement, "I'm so glad nobody gave up on me after I killed Abby," he would not have said their names. He would not have said their names. I think he would, if he would have made that statement, which doesn't sound right, regardless of that, I think it would have been more along the lines of, "I'm glad no one gave up on me after I killed them," or the girls, those girls. They wouldn't have put their actual names in there, okay? That's bullshit. Sorry. That is absolute bullshit. And the secondary statement is complete bullshit. They are literally scripting this, folks, in my opinion. And anybody that don't see that, come on now. Back up and read it a couple of times, and you'll see what I'm saying. 100%, Charlotte, 100%. And me, I did it all by myself. No one helped me. Come on. This is a joke.
he heard Allen say, "I want to confess. I know a lot more." And he said, "Why are you doing this? Do you know God? Do you know why I'm here? I killed Abby and Libby." Those were the initial testimony that we heard today about the confessions. And it was interesting during that time to, again, watch the jury taking very close notes about what was being said. And to see at one point Richard Allen I saw sitting there, and he was just kind of shaking his head no.
We also heard about the conditions that he was living in. That was what came up on
cross-examination.
And the defense was trying to point out that he was living in terrible conditions in a situation where he wasn't even hadn't been adjudicated yet. He was not, he had been charged, but here he is in a prison with other people who have gone through the trial process and been found guilty, and this was not his reality. And yet here he is in solitary confinement on suicide watch. Safekeeping, I think, was the word that safekeeping order that John Gallipo referred to, but for the most part was by himself in a 12-by-8 cell, metal door, little window for the food. And this is when the defense got into some of those details, some of the behaviors that he engaged in while he was in that prison. And the guards testified about Richard Allen drinking out of his toilet, Richard Allen smearing feces on himself, Richard Allen eating his own feces, and the defense was, asking them, "Do you think this is normal? And did you know that Richard Allen had a diagnosed mental illness when he came into the facility?" We know that he has indicated that he has anxiety and
Welcome, Miss Jody. Wonderful to have you here tonight. And I want to know something. The fact they're saying that he was drinking toilet water and eating feces and all this, I want to know if that's testimony from the guards or if that's something that they know, that they visually saw, that they have proof of, or something that he admitted to. Still, I want to know that. I need to know that to be at this point. I need to know if that is just pure testimony from them, or if it's video or something audio. It's on tape. Okay, that's what I need to know. Okay, because if not, at this point, I'm having a hard time believing almost anything they're saying. Thank you, Pebbles, because I still, truly, still feel that a lot of this truly is truly. Just saying, guys.
Depression. And the guards talked about not knowing that he had any kind of diagnosed mental illness. And many of them also testified that they believed that he was faking it, that he was acting out to get attention. One guard testified that you wouldn't see Richard Allen would be very nice and very calm and very polite. They also said that many of them said that he was very polite in his demeanor. One officer, corrections officer, described him as looking like a deer in headlights when he first came in. But that, you know, that his behavior would switch so quickly that led them to believe that he was faking some of this behavior. And the defense really attacked that and basically said, you know, don't you think it's possible to be in those kind of conditions and just lose it?
Right.
And lose it.
And I think one of the interesting things during cross-examination on pretty much all of these witnesses that Brad Rosie of the defense counsel kept asking over and over again. He said to these correction officers, even said to the ward, he said, so tell me, how much training do you have in mental health behaviors? And, you know, several of them would say, well, we get a little bit of training, but most of them, you know, acknowledge that we would not be able to really diagnose if someone truly had mental illness.
Right.
So it's one of the themes we're going to hear over and over again here over the next couple of weeks, as especially once the defense starts to put on their side of this case, is hearing them talk about the fact that the conditions that Richard Allen was in, specifically at the Westville Correctional Facility, we heard the warden today say he was in he had better conditions in Westville than other inmates in the cell block. Right. Here's what you got to keep in mind. That is
I have to agree with Alicia. I don't care what situation I'm in. I don't think I could ever do that. Ever. Well, the water is recycled through the whole thing anyway, brutally. The toilet water is recycled through the top of it, from my understanding. That's my point, Critical. That was my whole point, my question. Was there psych evaluation done at that point? If there wasn't, why? I think that's what we're getting to, Bobby, at some point. I think that's coming. I don't think he ate his own feces, guys. I don't think he did that. I truly don't think he did that. This is why I need to see and hear all this shit. It's driving me nuts.
A maximum security facility for what's described as the worst of the worst offenders in the state of Indiana.
Right.
And what the defense is trying to point out is, yeah, he might have gotten a few extra visits with his family that maybe some other inmates didn't get. However, most inmates in pretrial detention are not sent off to the state's toughest maximum security facility. They're usually put in a local jail where they get much better, much different conditions than what Richard Allen had to endure during 13 months that he was essentially in solitary confinement.
Solitary, yeah. I mean, during this time, he's not in with the general population. He's in this whole separate wing with, as you say, the worst of the worst. And because he's on suicide watch, there's, I think, one cell for someone who could be, and each block has one cell, and it has a camera. So he is being monitored 24/7. That they pointed out that he had no privacy, not when he went to the bathroom, not when he talked. The only, I guess, bit of privacy he had was when he would be taken out to talk to his psychologist, Dr. Walla.
To meet in a
very confined, a cage, right? Yes. They called it a cage. And I mean, after you left, we heard from a few more prison guards who talked about some of his behavior, some of the things that he said to them. Officer Brandon Miller testified that Richard Allen told him he killed 2 girls from Delphi with a box cutter, that he stole it from CVS and left it in a CVS trash can. And Officer Miller also testified that Richard Allen told him he wanted to rape the girls, but he got scared, panicked, and instead killed them. So we heard that from Officer Brandon Miller. We also heard some really graphic details from Officer Brandon Smith. In the middle of the night, Officer Smith testified that Richard Allen just kind of started talking to himself and said, "Kathy, I did it. I'm guilty. Run, Kathy, run. I did it. I killed those 2 little girls, so I have to kill myself now." And the same officer testified just an hour later, Richard Allen stands up and he starts singing "God Bless America." And then he testified that he walks over to the door and he's actually masturbating and singing "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys." And he's licking the window of the door. Then he's singing "God Bless America" again and running in place. And when Officer Smith is talking about this, I mean, there were several moments that were really uncomfortable. This obviously was one of them for a lot of folks. And obviously when Brad Rosie was on cross questioning some of these guards about him drinking toilet water and eating his own feces. You could see people kind of shifting, and the jury actually had, you know, questions about that. Well, if somebody is doing that to themselves and smearing themselves with that, how long does it take you before you call someone, before you call a mental health professional
Yes.
to assist and step in?
So the things that you're describing, the things that the jury heard about today, those are things that we would have to think that jurors would be weighing. You know, is this?
Let me ask you then. If he was doing that then, why is he not doing that stuff now? What changed? I'm just curious. I totally believe he was put there on purpose, and that ignorant ISP and sheriff conspired with the judge to get it done. That's why the judge promptly recused himself, in my opinion. Okay. I can't argue with that one because I kind of feel like, yeah, I can believe that, the tomboy. Check that out. Taken off drugs and pulled out of solitary confinement, and it changes everything. Think about it. Interesting.
A person who is in his right mind.
If I'm going to pull it up, guys, here one of these days, I'm going to pull up the whole thing. I looked it up. What the solitary confinement can do to a human being in a very, 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 very short period of time. This ain't nothing. What you're hearing here, nothing.
At the time that these confessions would be made, or is this someone who is so mentally incapacitated that their behavior is irrational and you might not be able to trust or believe what that person is saying? So again, that is the direction the defense is moving to. We're going to hear a lot more about that on cross-examine when the defense puts on their case coming up here in the coming weeks.
And you could tell the jury had a lot of questions. I mean, even after you left, for Officer Clemens, they had several questions for him about, you know, how does this work? What is the kind of training that you get in kind of mental health? How can you tell? One officer testified that he could tell from somebody's eyes that if somebody was lying or not. And Brad Rosie really went after him on that, saying, so you can look in somebody's eyes and tell. And he kind of, you know, backed off on that. So I mean, intense stuff.
I am so glad that we are tag teaming because
there's a lot, right?
There's a lot, and it allows, you know, we still have our responsibilities for our newscasts at noon and at 4 and at 5. So it's great that when at times when I'm not in there, you can be in there. At times you can't be in there, I'm in there. A lot of the time we're in there together. So I'm grateful that we are doing this together.
Me too.
Scott, we still expect coming up. Again, the jury is going to actually hear Richard Allen's voice because our understanding is there are also some prison confessions from when he makes phone calls home and is talking to his wife and his mother. So we expect the jury is going to be hearing those probably, I would think, tomorrow, if not coming up on Thursday. So the state is getting toward the end of what it said that it was going to present. They said 3 things that they're going to present on their case. Number 1, it's about Bridge Guy. We heard about people who say that Richard Allen is Bridge Guy and saw Bridge Guy out of the scene, about a bullet, or essentially a cartridge that was found at the crime scene that they linked back to Richard Allen having cycled through his gun, and then these confessions. So we are now on the 3rd leg of this.
I saw it too,
of this case that the state is presenting to the jury. Really jam-packed day, Scott, and we expect we will have a lot more coming up tomorrow.
For sure.
All right, Bob Siegel, Emily Longnecker, continuing outstanding coverage here for 13 News. Thank you so much, both, and get a good night's sleep, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, guys, day 11. Here we go.
Thanks for inviting us in. This is the Delphi Debrief here on WTHR+. Day 11 of the Delphi murders trial was a shocking one. A psychologist today testified about suspect Richard Allen confessing to killing Libby German and Abby Williams. In a moment, our legal expert, Katie Jackson-Lindsay, will be in studio with me to break down what this means for the case. But first, let's get you right out to Delphi with senior investigative reporter Bob Siegel and Emily Longnecker. They were in court today. Bob and Emily?
Scott, 2 days in a row now, we have heard testimony that's been all about Richard Allen's jailhouse.
I agree with that one.
Yesterday, we heard from 8 different prison staff members. They all testified about hearing confessions in one form or another. Those were pretty general confessions that we heard about. Today, by far, the testimony we heard today, the most damaging so far for Richard Allen out of all the.
Oh yeah, I already know, Alicia. It definitely will cause some really, really crazy behavior. I'll show you guys that too.
Testimony that we've heard over the last couple of weeks, and the testimony today, it came from the psychologist who saw Richard Allen just about every day that he was at Westville Correctional Facility for more than a year.
Right, and very specific. She had very specific testimony about the kind of confessions he made yesterday. You know, the defense referred to generalized confessions that he made to these prison guards today. Very specific wording.
Let's get you up to speed on the witnesses that we heard testimony from today. The first witness, the one that we've been referring to, Dr. Monica Walla, she was on the stand for more than 5 hours, and she's the prison psychologist who met with Allen throughout late 2022 and 2023 while he was at Westville. We also heard from Steve Mullen. It was his third time taking the witness stand during this trial. He was the Delphi police chief at the time of the murders, and he's now the lead investigator for the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office. And then we heard from Brad Weber. He is a local Delphi resident who owns property very close to the murder scene. Really surprising testimony, or the way that we heard testimony from him today. We'll talk about that in a little bit. First, let's talk about Dr. Walla. She was the state's star witness today. She was on the stand for more than 5 hours testifying about her daily meetings with Richard Allen, serving in the role as his psychologist. She told jurors that last April, Allen told her during a one-on-one meeting, "I killed Abby and Libby, I'm sorry." But it was a month later, during another meeting, that Walla says Allen not only confessed, but he gave details of the murder.
That's his doctor? That is not who I expected to see.
Walla read from her clinical notes today, telling the jury what Allen told her. And she said, Allen went to his parents' house in the morning, bought a 6-pack of beer on the way home and drank 3 of those beers, and then bundled up and went out to the trails. That's where he saw Abby and Libby, and he followed them across the bridge. She said Allen told her that he did something with his gun at that point, which he thought might explain how a cartridge from the gun ended up at the crime scene. And she said Allen told her that he instructed Abby and Libby to go down the hill. The psychologist told the jury that Allen then said he planned on sexually assaulting Abby and Libby, but he saw a van and got scared, so he told the girls to cross the creek. And Wallace said that the defendant told her that that's where, in her words, cut their necks. That's what she said that Richard Allen told her, cut their necks, and made sure that they were dead, and then covered their bodies with branches and returned to his car, staying off the trail so that he would not be seen. So Wallace said that that was one of multiple confessions that she heard from Richard Allen during his time at Westville, and that, again, there were multiple confessions. And it's interesting to point out that you might think that your conversations with a doctor or a psychologist would be private, and the defense team tried to exclude Dr. Wallace's comments and her testimony from the trial. Right. The judge ruled that she could talk about her interactions, despite the fact that she was serving as his doctor, right, because of a very specific Indiana law that when it comes to confessions or murders, that type of testimony is allowed.
Yeah, and she talked about writing those down with a pen on taking notes, and then actually going back each day and entering them into a system, and then she would shred her notes. And the defense really attacked that, the fact that she shred her notes and thought that that was not best practices. And she said that she did that, for security reasons and privacy reasons.
And it was interesting that when Dr. Walla was reading from her notes today, that evidence, that exhibit, was actually passed out to all the jurors, so they could follow along in her notes as she was testifying. And one of those clinical notes that she read from actually was another confession involving a phone call that Richard Allen made to his wife while he was in prison. And Dr. Wallace said that Richard Allen requested that she actually stay with him so that she could hear him call his wife, Kathy. And I want to just share with you what she recalled from that. She said that he asked his wife if family loved him and would always love him. He had talked about the fact that he might have to live the rest of his life in prison. He mentioned the electric chair, and he stated, I killed Abby and Libby, at which point she said that she could hear Kathy Allen, Richard's wife, saying, stop saying that. And then he said, I didn't do everything that I said, but I did kill Abby and Libby.
Right.
So again, the jury got to hear what is really, I mean, once the jury hears those types of things, that's not something that you can unhear.
They cannot unhear it.
Yeah, I mean, very, very specific details that he provided. And again, this was multiple conversations that he had that Dr. Walla overheard.
And the state has been saying that, you know, that they would eventually, that he had provided details that only the killer would know. And I think that we heard some of those details today, right?
Yeah, we did. And it's interesting, though, because in the interrogations with Richard Allen, we saw those videotapes earlier in the week, there were multiple details, obviously, details.
He doesn't to me, Virginia. I respect your feelings on it, sir. You know that, brother. But he doesn't to me, because Bridger guy looks like he's 5'10" to 6 foot tall. Richard Allen's 5'4". There's no comparison as far as I'm concerned. Not, especially not with the height of the person. That's all.
Some of which have come out in the media, but there were also details that I think investigators shared with him saying, look, we have this information, we have this information from the crime scene. So it is still a little bit of a question mark about how many of the details that Richard Allen shared on that phone call at that point in time would be only details that the killer would know that weren't already shared with him.
And the defense made a point of talking about when he would receive the amount of discovery that he had received, the discovery information about the case, the probable cause, all of these details, and how thick that discovery file was, and then that they met with him. And it seemed to me anyway that they were kind of alluding that he might have had, you know, specific details about
See, for me, Virginia, it's hard to tell because there's so many layers of clothes on this person. It's really hard to tell how big or small that person is, torso-wise, whatever. I just can't get past his height. That's my biggest issue with the whole thing there. So yeah, the face looks off to me. No, I struggle with that in a big way. If he was in solitaire, how could over 100 prison guards, he had over 100 prison talk to him while in solitaire? I don't know, Terry. I don't know, truly. I don't know about that either, Ruby. Somebody told me that happened, but I don't know for sure. Bridge guy was figured out a long time ago. Voice is even the same. A lot of people believe that they know who Bridge guy is.
the crime because he had all of this discovery evidence to go through and look at.
That's a great point.
Is that how you took it?
Yes.
Is that how I took it?
And that he got very agitated and that his mental state declined after he got this huge amount of discovery material. So we would assume that a lot of that discovery material might also have some details.
Right.
Do want to talk about his state of mind because that was a really big focus of today's testimony from Dr. Walla, trying to better understand, was Richard Allen, was he psychotic? Was he out of his mind at the time that he made these confessions, or was he not? And for me, it was very confusing because during, as the state was asking Dr. Walla to read through her notes, they would ask her to focus on very specific sections that made him seem that he was in his right mind, that he was perfectly fine, versus the state pointing out,
the defense
the defense pointing out and asking her to read from portions of her clinical notes over 13 months where he was not.
Right.
Okay.
Where he had many concerns about the conditions that he was living in.
And let me give some examples of that. So when the state asked Dr. Walla, they pointed out certain parts in his in her notes. And she said that Richard Allen's confession was one of them, the main one that we told you about, where he gave a lot of details. She said it was concise and in chronological manner. At the time, his anxiety and depression seemed improved. At times, she said he does not present as psychotic. She said at certain points, it seemed like he was faking mental health problems, that he was remorseful, wanted to share his Bible with Abby and Libby's families and apologize to them. And at other times, she talked about things that he did that just then like contradicted the fact that he was in a good state of mind when he made these confessions. She said that at times, right around the time that he made the confessions, he was eating his own feces, rolling on the ground naked, banging his head on his cell so hard that he had 2 black eyes, and they had to give him medication for psychosis against his will. They were so concerned about his mental state. And when they asked him why he ate his feces, he responded, because he was sane and didn't have water. And then when Dr. Walla told him that that didn't make sense, his response was, I know. So what to make of that? That's part of the testimony. And then when the state asked Dr. Walla to refer to very specific parts of her notes, Walla acknowledged that she had diagnosed him with a serious mental illness, that he was a fragile man, she said, that while he was in in Westville Prison, that he had an abrupt occurrence of psychotic behavior around the time of his confessions. She testified that she has thought more about the idea. She said that it seemed perhaps he was faking his mental illness, but since then, she's thought more about that.
And thought perhaps she was wrong on that.
Yes.
Yes, brutally, there is. Very good point, Mikey. Very good point, sir.
He was not faking it.
Yes. So was he sane? Was he mentally ill? Now it's for the jury to decide. And at least for me, sitting in the courtroom today, I'm not sure where I come down on that. And that might be confusing for the jury as well.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
And we learned about the conditions too.
Yes.
That he was living in. I mean, when the defense was asking her to read her, I think it was called the suicide notes, the notes that she took while he was on suicide watch, right?
Yes.
You know, she noted, and the defense had her note about, you know, that he was fighting ants and cockroaches for his food. Again, you talked about the 2 black eyes that he had been, you know, banging his head, that other prisoners he had told her were calling him baby killer and telling him to kill himself. Therapy in a 3x3 area, kind of behind a cage. That's how the therapy was. And there was kind of a debate of whether he was shackled during that or whether they had taken his shackles off during that therapy. And he told her, the defense, you know, talked about this, that he told her that he felt like he was being already treated like he was guilty. And at one point said that he didn't do this and would never be okay being in prison for something he didn't do.
And they pointed out again, he was under video surveillance 24/7. The whole time he was there, because he was under suicide watch. He was in a special cell where they could watch him, even when he was going to the bathroom. They talk about the fact that he couldn't fully turn the lights off in his cell at any point. They just talked about that. And the defense has been working the last couple of days and talking with the prison officials to try and establish for the jury that the conditions under which Richard Allen was living at Westville Correctional Facility would drive anybody crazy. Right. It seems to be the way that they're going and what they want the jury to believe.
And they also talked about the physical changes. They had Dr. Waller talk about the physical changes that she noted in Richard Allen, that at one point his eyes seemed to be bugging out of his head.
Bulging out of his
head. That's right.
Yes.
Bulging out of his head was one of the things that I took note of. And of course, you said the 2 black eyes from self-harm, that he was self-harming.
Yes. So, Scott, it was a fascinating day of testimony from Dr. Walla today. And again, I think it's going to leave a lot of questions for the jury, just as far as after hearing these really compelling confessions from a psychologist who testified that she heard these things and lots of details from Richard Allen. What's the jury going to actually make of whether or not he was mentally capable at the time? So that's really one of the big things that came out of the session today in court.
All right, Bob and Emily, we'll get back to you shortly. Want to bring in Katie Jackson Lindsay. She's our 13 News legal analyst during this case. Joins us in studio. Based on what Bob and Emily were discussing about Dr. Walla, the prison psychologist, and her testifying about these alleged confessions, what do you make of all that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, right? There's first the confessions in and of themselves. Are they credible confessions? Are these sort of coerced confessions, not in the normal sense where we normally see a person being interrogated so aggressively that they are coerced to say things that aren't true? But on the other hand, while he's not being interrogated, he is living in this squalor and these really, really challenging conditions. And so there's that just immediate thought of, what is a jury to do with this? Right? It's really hard as a defense attorney to have your client ever confessing to a crime. How can you convince a jury that your client didn't do something that he said that he did? But on the other hand, having been a deputy prosecutor, I would find these confessions equally challenging to present as concrete evidence of him confessing to the crime. And so just that part is difficult to unpack. And then to hear the things that we've heard about this particular witness, to hear some things as it relates to her credibility, and we heard Bob talk about how she was inconsistent in some of her conclusions. On the one hand, she's
I really like her. She's amazing.
Psychotic, but she's also saying he's being treated for psychosis. She's saying that she doesn't think that he was mentally ill, but she diagnosed him with a mental illness. And now here, live in person at trial, she's saying that she's starting to sort of rethink some of the things that she once thought. So I would agree with Bob. It has to be really challenging for the jury to unpack this and reconcile some of these conflicts. And you don't usually see conflicts in evidence from experts. A conflict in the evidence from an eyewitness is normal. For example, we heard early on some differences in the testimony about what Bridge Guy looked like. Well, those are normal everyday people who are eyewitnesses, and that evidence has just been deemed unreliable across the board for decades.
Right.
But to hear this person who's an expert in her field delivering such information in a way that
Take care, Tomboy. Be careful, please. And yes, Terry was in solitary when he confessed.
It's so incohesive and hard to follow. I just don't really know what this did for either side.
Right.
But at the end of it all, they are still confessions, and that's really challenging evidence for the defense and really big gains for the state.
Think about what the jury has heard during these 11 days. So if you think back to when these girls were killed 7.5 years ago, so 2017, then Richard Allen a couple of days later calls the tip line saying, hey, I was on the trail, and they brought him in 5 years later. They basically wrote him off in a file saying that Richard Allen's been cleared. Then they discover the file. 5 years later, back in 2022, that's when he's first interviewed. So the jury is hearing and seeing videos of Richard Allen denying anything about this. And then, of course, now these confessions come out after he has been arrested and charged, and now he's in this prison. And as you mentioned, he's, he again
Be careful,
is deemed to
Tomboy.
be, not guilty, presumed innocent. He's in this prison, though, with people who've been convicted, right?
Exactly. And
The worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst. And I think it's really important to highlight this is not normal. I have handled dozens of homicide cases at this point. I've never had a client kept it on pretrial detention in a maximum security prison.
Right.
Now, the circumstance is unusual for Richard Allen because there's a safekeeping order where they have to keep him safe. And so arguably it's for his own safety to be kept here. But the conditions there are unbearable. I would argue that those conditions aren't appropriate for a convicted person,
Right.
Let alone a person who is innocent until proven guilty. We've heard that he was in that particular area for 13 months, over a year. We've heard that the lights are kept on all day. We've heard that he was facing scrutiny and bantering and all kinds of insults from other inmates.
Right.
That is a lot to endure for any person, let alone a person who came in there in a fragile condition to begin with.
Right.
And so I would think that would cause deterioration for anyone. And then, as Emily and Bob noted, he's surrounded by his evidence.
Right. This discovery that they've been talking about. Right?
Exactly.
And there's
Yes.
maybe some information in there that he's seeing and all that. Right.
Exactly. And you have to assume this far into the case, he had been shown photographs by his defense attorneys, because as a defense attorney, you have an obligation to share with your client all of the evidence that they're facing. And we talked a little bit previously about how jurors are processing seeing these crime scene photos.
That'd be
So
just so hard for them.
so hard for them,
Yeah.
right? And if you are Richard Allen and you truly didn't commit this crime, but you're being confronted with these photographs and being told that you caused this harm to these completely innocent girls and you really didn't do it, it would cause you to start to lose your mind. And
Right.
so I think the jury has a really hard job of balancing all of that and figuring out the truth.
We're going to be talking more with Katie Jackson Lindsay in a moment, but Bob and Emily want to bring you back in. The defense spent a large part of today attacking the credibility of this prison psychologist, Dr. Waller, right?
Yes, Scott, it wasn't just that they had questions kind of about some of her inconsistent testimony, but they had an opportunity to bring up some of the things that we first heard about in late July when she testified during a pretrial hearing at that point. And there were some bombshells that came out at that point that were hard to believe and hard to imagine, and the jury got to hear those today.
Yeah, we knew. I mean, she testified this summer in those pretrial hearings and today that she was a true crime enthusiast.
Yep.
She told her supervisors that. She said that they were fine with that. And she says today that she told her supervisors that she had had an interest in this case even before she started treating Richard Allen, even before he got to Westville. Also, that she had, this is before she treated Richard Allen, visited the bridge.
Yep. Let's pull up a graphic here. I want to show our viewers exactly the things that she told the jury today. During cross-examination, Dr. Waller told the jury, like Emily just mentioned, that she's a huge fan of true crime and she's followed the DELPHI case for years. She even visited the crime scene with her boyfriend and said she frequently listens to podcasts and YouTube videos discussing the murders and Richard Allen. And she admitted to the jury that she talked about those videos with Allen while he was her patient and told him what people were saying about him as she is treating him. And she also admitted her fascination with the case led her to improperly access case information about other prison inmates rumored to have possible connections to the DELPHI murders, something that is strictly against department rules. So this was, again, the defense's effort to highlight some professional lapses and to question really her decision making and to impeach this witness before the jury.
Yeah, I mean, at one point she testified that she told Richard Allen, look, you have supporters out there online. And as I'm reading some of these comments, and we also know that she was recommending to some people online some podcasts that they should listen to, that were the good podcasts to listen to on DELPHI, where, I think she talked about one podcast doesn't get too emotional. It's just pretty factual. And so listen to this podcast or that podcast. But we know, and she didn't talk about what information she accessed on those DOC computers today. She didn't go into details, but this summer she certainly did during those pretrial hearings. We know that she accessed the file of a guy named Keegan Klein. And we know from, past investigations and things that, probable cause affidavit that Keegan Klein had actually been talking to Libby German the night before the girls were murdered online and kind of planning to potentially meet her.
Did I hear that right? Wait a minute.
Those today.
Yeah, we knew. I mean, she testified this summer in those pretrial hearings and today that she was a true crime enthusiast.
Yes.
She told her supervisors that. She said that they were fine with that. And she says today that she told her supervisors that she had an interest in this case even before she started treating Richard Allen, even before he got to Westville. Also, that this is before she treated Richard Allen, visited the bridge.
Yep. Let's pull up a graphic here. I want to show our viewers exactly the things that she told the jury today. During cross-examination, Dr. Wallach told the jury, like Emily just mentioned, that she's a huge fan of true crime and she's followed the DELPHI case for years. She even visited the crime scene with her boyfriend and said she frequently listens to podcasts and YouTube videos discussing the murders and Richard Allen. And she admitted to the jury that she talked about those videos with Allen while he was her patient and told him what people were saying about him.
What the actual hell? No fucking way, guys. Wow.
As she is treating him. And she also admitted her fascination with the case led her to improperly access case information about other prison inmates rumored to have possible connections to the DELPHI murders, something that is strictly against department rules. So this was, again, the defense's effort to highlight some professional lapses and to question really her decision-making and to impeach this witness before the jury.
Yeah, I mean, at one point she testified that she told Richard Allen, look, you have supporters out there online. And as I'm reading some of these comments, and we also know that she was recommending to some people online some podcasts that they should listen to, that were the good podcasts to listen to on DELPHI, where, I think she talked about one podcast doesn't get too emotional. It's just pretty factual. And so listen to this podcast or that podcast. But we know, and she didn't talk about what information she accessed on those DOC computers today. She didn't go into details, but this summer she certainly did during those pretrial hearings. We know that she accessed the file of a guy named Keegan Klein. And we know from, past investigations and things that, probable cause affidavit that Keegan Klein had actually been talking to Libby German the night before the girls were murdered online and kind of planning to potentially meet her at the bridge the next day. And we also know that law enforcement looked at him as a legitimate suspect initially. And they, a couple years into this, put out a call to us, to the media and to the public, if anybody had contact with a social media profile, Anthony_shots. And that was the social media profile that Keegan Klein was using to meet underage girls online and get them to send him pictures. And so when police looked at Keegan Klein, ultimately he ended up having an alibi for the day of the murders not being in DELPHI, but they found all this other stuff on all of his devices, which is why he's in prison now after being convicted by, to lots of possession of child porn. So she was looking up information on Keegan Klein while she's at work on those DOC computers. And she talked about that this summer.
And did you see the jury and how they reacted to some of that testimony?
Actually, I wasn't looking at them. I might have been at that point, so tell me, because I'm curious.
At least one juror, when she was explaining, some of these things and kind of her role, her interest in this case as she was treating Richard Allen in prison, one of the jurors looked, her mouth was like, whoa. I mean, so is there a conflict of interest here? Certainly the defense pointed out that some of the things, accessing the computer, continuing to follow all these things and to share information with Richard Allen about what's being said in the public, it's at a minimum, it's not a good look. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's some professional norms that you don't violate that they brought up that it appeared that she did.
Yeah, I mean, she said she was able to compartmentalize it all, but I think the jury had questions in the end.
Including the question of whether or not she informed her supervisors that she had done all these things. Right. And her testimony varied back and forth whether she did or whether she didn't. But we might hear more about that coming up.
And we also learned at one point that she's no longer employed by the third party that the DOC had contracted with that she would work through. So we know that as well.
So testimony then shifted.
Yep.
After Dr. Walla, we heard again from Steve Mullen,
Right.
former Delphi police chief, and his testimony was interesting today. I don't think it was like earth-shattering testimony what he had to say, but why he shared that testimony was super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely speaks to the fact that the jury is, has paid attention and asked some good questions, and the state thinks that they've asked good questions. Earlier in the week, the jury had a question. If
That's awesome, Madam
investigators
Hart. Thank you
had
for letting me
looked at the
know,
time of the
ma'am.
murders at all of the Ford Focuses, 2016 black Ford Focuses that were registered in Carroll County at the time of the murders.
Which is the kind of car.
Which is the kind of car that is on video, the Hoosier Harvest store video. They say that on that video, that is Richard Allen's 2016 black Ford Focus SE driving, and they've taken still shots of it, right? And in it, you can't see the license plate.
You can't see who's in the car.
You can't see who's in the car. You can't see the marking SE, right? But you see the silhouette that they say resembles that
car
car.
He said he was driving.
Correct, right. So Mullins was back on the stand to answer that question from the jury.
Directly from jurors.
Like he went to the BMV and consulted the BMV and got information about those records in 2016 and 2017 in Carroll County and surrounding counties for the 2016 black Ford Focuses, right? And he found 18 entries of 2016 black Ford Focuses in 2016 and 2017, both in Carroll County and surrounding counties. Then he drilled down a little more. 8 of those black Ford Focuses were SE models. Then he drilled down farther and testifying in Carroll County, only one person had that vehicle at that time, a black Ford Focus SE model registered in their name, Richard Allen.
Interesting. So one of the neat things here in Indiana, the jury in real time can ask questions of witnesses. They write the questions down on a piece of paper. At the end of a witness's testimony, they can pass those pieces of paper to the judge. And as long as those questions are not out of bounds, then the judge asked the witness direct specific questions from the jurors. It was really neat to see how this played out today. And the fact that not only did they ask a question a few days ago, but the state thought the question was so relevant and important, they wanted to answer it. They did research and put their witness back on the stand today to answer that question.
And then the defense attacked that, and they said, look, there was other information. Well, first they said, do you track all of the people that drive into Carroll County from all the counties that might be, driving Ford Focuses? Do you track who drives here? And they pointed out in the video that you can't see the SE right on that thing, and that you can't see the license.
Okay, sorry guys, 10:22. I got to figure out where we were on this stupid video, though. Does anybody remember exactly where we were at with this?
About the physical changes. They had Dr. Walla talk about the physical changes that she.
You guys remember exactly where we were at on this? Possibly by any chance? No. The car. Right. Here we go. Thank you.
Hoosier Harvest store video. They say that on that video, that is Richard Allen's 2016 black Ford Focus SE driving, and they've taken still shots of it, right? And in it, you can't see the license plate.
You can't see who's in the car.
You can't see who's in the car. You can't see the marking SE, right? But you see the silhouette that they say resembles that
car
car.
He said he was driving.
Correct, right. So Mullins was back on the stand to answer that question from the jury.
Directly from jurors.
Like he went to the BMV and consulted the BMV and got information about those records in 2016 and 2017 in Carroll County and surrounding counties for the 2016 black Ford Focuses, right? And he found 18 entries of 2016 black Ford Focuses in 2016 and 2017, both in Carroll County and surrounding counties. Then he drilled down a little more. 8 of those black Ford Focuses were SE models. Then he drilled down farther and testifying in Carroll County, only one person had that vehicle at that time, a black Ford Focus SE model registered in their name, Richard Allen.
Interesting. So one of the neat things here in Indiana, the jury in real time can ask questions of witnesses. They write the questions down on a piece of paper. At the end of a witness's testimony, they can pass those pieces of paper to the judge. And as long as those questions are not out of bounds, then the judge asked the witness direct specific questions from the jurors. It was really neat to see how this played out today. And the fact that not only did they ask a question a few days ago, but the state thought the question was so relevant and important, they wanted to answer it. They did
Exactly, critical. Oh my God. If it was another Hyundai, I'd have lost. Like, I wouldn't even follow this at that point.
research
And they did.
and put their witness back on the stand today to answer that question.
And then the defense attacked that, and they said, look, there was other information. Well, first they said, do you track all of the people that drive into Carroll County from all the counties that might be, driving Ford Focuses? Do you track who drives here? And they pointed out in the video that you can't see the SE, right, on that thing, and that you can't see the license plate, and you can't really see who's driving the thing. They definitely pointed that out. And then Jennifer Auger pointed out from 2011 to 2017, there were other Ford Focus models, not just the SE. There were other Ford Focuses that resembled, that were similar to that SE model. It got very, very specific. And she brought out another list, 65 black Ford Focuses with similar body types to the SE that were registered in Carroll County and surrounding counties during that time. And then the jury, they came back with another question. I mean, they pay attention, and they really pay attention. And they asked about the rims on the Ford Focus
that you can see through.
That you can see through. You can see daylight through. Like they've been described as spokes almost, that you can see daylight through these rims. And they wanted to know if there were other models beyond the SE of Ford Focuses that had the option for those kind of rims, to have those kind of rims on those other models. And Mullins didn't know that. He didn't know that.
Yeah, I think the jury's been asking really, really, really good questions, and they're really, truly paying attention to. That's important to this. That's really good as far as I'm concerned, and I'm grateful they're doing that.
But he did know that those kind of rims were available for that SE model.
It boggles my mind when you think about, again, we've heard from 39 different witnesses so far.
Right.
Each of them sharing all these little tiny details. And you just kind of wonder, what is it going to be? Is it going to be one of those tiny details that's going to stick out in a juror's mind that could either create some type of reasonable doubt, or that is going to convince them that Richard Allen actually committed these crimes? So many details they're trying to keep track of.
So many.
Let's pivot now to the last witness of the day. And I'm interested to hear you share the story, because I had ducked out of the courtroom to be able to do my live shots for earlier in the day. You got to hear this last witness.
I did.
You said it was extraordinary testimony.
It was. Well, first I want to bring up a map to kind of orient us, this a map that we've done some markings on so that people can kind of understand. Okay, so we're looking at this map of Delphi near the crime scene. That yellow X is roughly where the crime scene is. And then if you look down and to the right, there's a red circle, and that's where a guy named Brad Weber lives. And if you can see, there's a white line there, that's 625 West. That leads to Brad Weber's house. His house is at the end of a private drive. You can also see in that green area there where the Monon High Bridge is located, where the girls were taken off the bridge on the south end. And then you also see, if you can see, Deer Creek, another white line, it runs under that bridge. And at the top of this drawing, if you can see, the Delphi Cemetery, and that's where investigators came down that day on February 14th and discovered the girls' bodies. They came down through the cemetery to that, approximately to that yellow X. So
again, we were pointing out,
Yes.
like, what's important right now is that red, that red circle represents
where Brad Weber
where
lives.
Brad Weber lives. The X in yellow right there, that is where the bodies of Abby and Libby were recovered. And just where you see where it says Monon High Bridge that we're looking at there, that is the bridge that extends from that spot down closer to that little access road, that driveway, so to speak, that Brad would take back and forth to his house.
Right. Okay. And the reason why I wanted to show you this, we wanted to show you this, was to kind of orient you to what you're going to hear next. So Brad Weber, the last witness of the day, as we showed you, he lives across the creek from where the girls' bodies were found, lives at the end of that private drive near the bridge. Okay. So he testified, the state brought him in today, and he testified that on the day that the girls went missing, February 13th, he clocked out of work at 2:30 p.m. that day. He works at the Subaru plant, and he clocked out at 2:30. And he drove home, and he said that drive takes about 25 minutes. And Weber says he was driving his van, and they showed him a picture. The state showed him a picture. It said, "Is this your van?" It was a white van. Here's where it got really interesting. On cross-examination, Andrew Baldwin said to Weber, quote, "You did not drive straight home from work on February 13th. And Weber said, "That's not correct." And he was pretty emphatic. And then Baldwin said, quote, "You told law enforcement on February 17th or 18th, you went and worked on your ATM machines." And Weber replied, "I said I dropped off a trailer." And Baldwin said, "That was earlier in the day. You went and worked on your ATM machines." And this is the point where Brad Weber shouted in that courtroom, "That is not correct. No." I mean,
he shouted it. And Andrew Baldwin then handed him a piece of paper, and everyone was trying to figure out, what is going on? What just happened here? This man is yelling. Baldwin hands him this piece of paper. Turns out it was a subpoena. We didn't see what that subpoena is about, but we assume it's maybe to come back and testify for the defense. The jury was looking stunned. They were all looking at each other. Some people had their mouths kind of hanging open. And we know that Weber is significant for the state because he lives near where the girls' bodies were found. The defense, though, if you remember, has said that Weber's gun, they tested Weber's gun, and the test, to see if it matched the cartridge found at the crime scene, and that the test results were inconclusive. And the defense has brought that up earlier in the week, that those tests were inconclusive. And the defense has also said, and you never searched Brad Weber's property that day. He has some outbuildings behind his property. And the defense made a point of saying that to investigators. And of course, that white van, we know Dr. Walla testified today that when Richard Allen, confessed to these killings, he said that he saw this van right before he was going to rape Abby and Libby. He panicked, took them across the creek, and killed them. So a lot going on here, but it was a moment, I can tell you. And then Brad Weber kind of, he grabbed the paper and he kind of just got out of that courtroom pretty quickly. And then we were all held in. We didn't get out as soon. I think they were kind of waiting for him to get out of there.
He was very agitated.
He was agitated, very.
So we've heard some testy exchanges in court, but for the most part, things fairly respectful. It sounds, Scott, today, some emotions are boiling over, and some witnesses are getting pretty frustrated. And based on the fact that a subpoena has been served, that very well could be for him to return when the state presents his case. So, Scott, we might be seeing this witness again.
And I was trying to figure out, what do you mean working on your ATM machines? What is this? And one of the folks that we share office space with here, one of the Dateline producers, was talking to some residents and kind of digging into that. What is that? And she was told and shared with us that Brad Weber works on ATM machines. He repairs them in town. So that was that explanation on that.
Scott, we're going to send it back to you. We'd love to hear Katie's thoughts on some of those exchanges that took place in court today.
All right, Bob and Emily, we'll get back to you shortly. So let's bring Katie Jackson-Lindsay back in. What do you think about the exchange that Brad Weber and the defense team had about the evidence?
A good point, Terry.
Talking about his timeline from leaving work back to his house, and this idea of, no, you were with the ATM machines. No, I told you I dropped off a trailer. What do you make about that?
Well, right now it's sort of mysterious and curious, right? I think it's the defense's way of starting to introduce some alternative theories about what happened. We don't know why that's relevant right now, but it's also not their case in chief. And we keep hearing that objection where the state objects to asking questions that are outside of the scope of their direct exam. And so they have to work within these fine lines of the direct exam, and they can't really develop why they're asking those questions. So when we hear that he was handed a piece of paper and stormed out of the courtroom, it most likely was a subpoena to come back during the defense's case in chief. I think it's also pretty powerful evidence for the state, because what we heard was that Mr. Weber was getting accused of something that he didn't do in the context of this heinous murder of these two innocent girls, and he reacted. And that's the state's witness. But the state wants the jury to believe that when Richard Allen reacts in this furious way, when he's accused of something that he's saying he didn't do, that means he must be guilty. And so even though at this moment we cannot tie up why that piece of evidence is relevant, it certainly is significant, just the entire scenario in and of itself.
Okay, the piece of evidence that you're talking about is what?
The piece of evidence is where Brad Weber was, why is that relevant at this moment? We don't know that.
Right.
We don't know the significance of whether he was working on an ATM machine or just on his way home. It's Richard Allen that's on trial, right? So why is that important at this moment? We don't know. The
other thing that was interesting when we heard Bob and Emily describe, this Brad Weber's timing, is the fact that the defense was able to figure out that unspent bullet, the one that had been cycled through a Richard Allen gun that was found at his house, was inconclusive. Did this bullet cartridge actually come from Brad Weber's gun? Isn't that sort of what they were sort of angling there?
Absolutely. And that's super significant, because inconclusive in the world of forensic science, inconclusive means they can't say either way. So they can't say that it did come from Brad Weber's gun, but they certainly can't say that it didn't. And so again, that's reasonable doubt, right? Back to that instruction, if there are two reasonable interpretations of the evidence, you have to go with the one consistent with Richard Allen's innocence. And so now the jury has heard that it's possible that it was Brad Weber's bullet from his gun, right? But on the other hand, the state has said, no, we can conclusively tie it to Richard Allen. So those two things don't work well together for the state.
All right, let's get back out to Bob and Emily. We also saw this new motion filed today. Tell us about that.
Yeah, 10 pages, this motion. The accused's second motion to admit evidence of Odinism, Norse paganism, and ritualistic killings. We've known from the beginning that the defense wants to be able to present to the jury an alternate theory that the girls were killed in some kind of ritualistic killing. And they also want to present some third-party suspects, people that they say that police talked to that they believe were involved in this. Now, they've presented a couple motions on this. And those pretrial hearings, they had a expert testify that, yes, she believed that this was a ritualistic killing, that the sticks laid on the girls' bodies were symbols, the marking on the tree, that was a symbol. The judge denied it. Obviously, we haven't heard anything about Odinism so far in this trial, and we haven't seen any third-party suspects. But what this second motion is about today is they say the testimony of witnesses that we've had so far in the past couple weeks, that they've kind of opened a door to them being allowed to present an alternative theory. And here's just a couple quick points that they said that opens the door. We had the pathologist, Dr. Kaur, testify about the autopsies, right? And that testimony involved that the girls were killed with either knives that were serrated instruments or non-serrated, providing the possibility, says the defense, that more than one person could have done this and killed the girls. And also they say that their expert has testified that knives are a part of ritualistic killings and involved with Norse paganism. They also say the prosecution this week admitted photos, or last week, of sticks on the girls' bodies. And they say that they deserve the chance to be able to present an alternative theory as to why those sticks were there, not just concealment, not just an undoing, as Jerry Holman testified. He said that he thought it was either someone was trying to conceal the girls' bodies or it was an undoing. And an undoing, from research and looking into it, is when a killer, kills someone and then they try and undo it in some way and give some kind of respect to the victims. And the defense is saying, look, there was no respect to those victims at the crime scene. So they want a chance to present an alternative theory that those sticks were placed on the girls in symbols. And then the third point they make is that Jerry Holman has testified that only one person is involved, and that in his experience, if more than one person is involved in a crime, usually somebody is talking and saying something to someone. And the defense is saying, look, Jerry Holman knows that investigators throughout this investigation talked to other people who made statements to relatives and such that they have deposed, that they were somehow involved in this. So the defense wants a chance to present this alternative theory and to the jury. And we know that the judge has said that, look, and the state has said that will just confuse the jury, that they would hear alternate theories and third-party suspects. Let's deal with this right now. But the defense now saying the testimony that we've had so far opens the door for.
Welcome, Kaylee. Welcome, Kim French. Great to see you guys tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Them to be able.
Mark and Betty, Elizabeth, thank you all for being here with us tonight for this.
To say, no, this is our theory, and here is why, and here are those third-party suspects.
And that alternate theory would be really a main cornerstone of the defense and what they want to offer to the jury. And we should point out that this trial testimony is scheduled for 25 days. Tomorrow is going to be day 12, which would be right around the midpoint. And what we're hearing is the state could rest its case as early as tomorrow. We expect that they might have 1-2 more days of witnesses and testimony at the most.
Right.
Tomorrow, we are expecting to hear what could be, again, even more powerful testimony and evidence against Richard Allen, and that would be confessions made in his own voice, phone calls made to his wife, to his mother that were told, part of these 60 or more confessions that he made while in prison. So we're expecting that testimony to come tomorrow, and after that, then probably going to be wrapping things pretty up pretty quickly and move things over to the defense.
To the defense, and they'll get their chance.
All right, Scott, we are about halfway through what we're expecting for this trial. Another fascinating day of testimony, and we will be back again tomorrow, bright and early. Testimony begins at 9 o'clock Thursday morning, and we will once again be right here in Carroll County for the Delphi murders trial. We're going to send it back to you.
All right, Bob Siegel, Emily Longneck are doing a great job breaking this down. Since cameras aren't in the court, our reporters are, and we break it down every night with the Delphi murders trial every weeknight at 10 o'clock right here on WTHR Plus. You can also find our ongoing coverage, including detailed reports.
All right, guys. Let's see. We got in 8, 9, and then 4. Yeah, 4 days, I think. 3 days, either way. So that's going to do it, guys. It is 10:30. We're 3 hours in. I think that's good for tonight. I appreciate you guys joining us. I don't want to cram too much in one night, guys. I want it to stay clean and clear, and the note-taking to be clear with that. But we will be back tomorrow morning for the morning show, as always. Yeah, absolutely, Pebbles. But either way, and then tomorrow night, we'll probably get, let's see, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we'll be pretty close to caught up tomorrow night. And then the following night, we should be able to have completely caught up. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. God knows I love you guys. I appreciate you so very much. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your night. Again, I will see you guys, for those of you that join us in the morning for the morning show. Waking up with me and Doodle and Arctic and Mama Bear at times. So I appreciate you all again so very much. Don't forget to love yourselves, love each other. Don't change a thing, folks. You guys are amazing. Much love, and have a great, great night. Good night. God bless, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye, folks.
Typing at the speed of light, hunting down the shadows, bringing wrongs to right, digging deep in the data facts, sharp as a knife. With every single story, he's fighting for a life. A voice for the voiceless, he won't stay quiet. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. Streaming loud and clear, cracking cases, open hearts filled with fear. His channel's a beacon in a world gone wrong. He guides us through the chaos, a soldier so strong. The flakes and the lights, they follow his lead. With every new case, he plants a new seed. Sharing their stories, giving hope where it fades. Daniel's a warrior through the trials he waves. In a world of silence, he shouts out their names. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. From the shadows you rise, is streaming loud and clear. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim